Good evening, everyone, and all those tuning in from home as we sort of begin to populate the Zoom attendees list for those in the room and for those logging in remotely. My name is Rob Champetti. I'm the chairman of the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals, and welcome to the agenda evening of the Newburyport ZBA of October 11th, 2022. It's just a few minutes after 7. Our appointed hour is 7 p.m. on the published notices, and I'm going to take a moment, establish our roll call, establish a quorum, designate for purposes of the record who will be our voting members this evening, introduce the board, then we will get right into the public hearings this evening. We have a packed agenda, so we're going to move through each of these as they appear on the agenda. For those that are watching from home, if you simply go to the Newburyport ZBA website or just Google Newburyport ZBA, you will come upon the web page for the Zoning Board of Appeals, and you can click on the agenda, and there is also a link right there for every one of the materials that we're going to be reviewing this evening. Every material or piece of documentation that we have before us or that we've been provided with, every member of the public also has access to by simply clicking and following along. Notwithstanding that, Caitlin Sullivan, our city planner, will be publishing on the Zoom screen for those watching remotely everything that's being referenced by the applicant in real time as the applicant is presenting it. So even if you can't find the link, just simply look at your screen and you'll see what's being referenced and discussed. So without further ado, I'm going to take a moment, introduce the members of the ZBA, and we will do a roll call. And as I mentioned, we'll establish a quorum, and we will get to the business of the evening. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, calling the roll of the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Ken Swanton. Here. Mr. Stephen Delisle. Here. Mr. Walter Channon. Here. Mr. Gregory Bennett. Yes. Ms. Lynn Scow. Not here, or at least not here yet, and Ms. Patricia. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members of the ZBA present. That establishes our legal quorum, which is our ability to vote on business before the ZBA. As is part of the rules as well as the zoning here in Massachusetts and in Newburyport, we are required to designate which among our members in attendance are the 5 designated voting members. And I believe unless there is any member, there's no member that's recusing themselves on any application this evening. And then 11 Prospect Street. Okay. So for purposes of all So the voting members this evening will be on all applications except for 11 Purchase Street. It will be myself, Rob Champetti, Stephen Delisle, Ken Swanton, Walter Channon, Gregory Bennett, and on the application of 11 Purchase Street, it will be Rob Champetti, Ken Swanton, Walter Channon, Gregory Bennett, and Patricia Peckman. Those are our established 5 voting members, and that's the flex that will happen with respect to one application before us this evening on 11 Purchase Street. Having established our quorum and designated our 5 voting members, I'll just take a moment and introduce the board. My name again is Rob Champetti. I'm the chairman of the CBA. To my left is Mr. Ken Swanton, vice chair. To his left, Mr. Gregory Bennett, member. To his left, Mr. Ken Swanton. I'm sorry. Yes. You can. Sorry, Mr. Bud Channing. To across from him is Mr. Ken Swanton, and to my immediate right is Patricia Peckman. And I'm not sure if we're still expecting Lynn Scow. Did I get something wrong?
Yes, that's 3 times.
Did I? So we have to sorry.
We don't even look at it.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's like you guys everybody's throwing me off with now this weird table. I'm going to pass the mashed potatoes, and this one, the parsnips will go. So if Lynn Scow comes, we will fold her into the proceedings, and we'll make that clear for anyone who's watching or following along via Zoom. So we have no matters that are pre-public hearing, so we're going to jump right into our first application. And the first application before us is a continuation from the hearing of September 27th, 2022. It's the application by applicants Francesca and Ryan Burke, care of Lisa Mead, attorney Mead, Mead, Talman and Costa LLC, 26 Eagle Street. The application is a special permit for non-conformities, 22-23, to construct an addition to a structure, extending the primary front yard setback and adding more than 500 square feet to a non-conforming lot. Attorney Mead.
Thank you very much. I have to smile because it is an odd configuration.
It's
It's
challenging.
It's pleasant. Let's just say it's pleasant.
Go ahead.
It's I'm Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street, on behalf of the applicant, Francesca and Ryan Burke. And Francesca is with me this evening. And Eileen Graff is the architect on the project, and she too is with me. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So this project is at 26 Eagle Street. It's located in the R2 zoning district in the DCOD overlay district. It's a single family home, and we're proposing to put on a single story addition with a porch. The structure was built in around 1850, according to the district data sheets and the Form B for the property, and 1869, according to the assessor's records. It's on a corner lot with its primary front yard as Carter Street and the secondary front yard as Eagle Street. If you look at the house, it looks like, before we change the definitions in the zoning, that the front is Eagle Street. So, however, the longest length is Carter Street, so that's the primary front yard. The setback requirements are 25 feet on the front and 10 in the rear and 10 feet on the sides. Of course, this has two front yards. The minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet and required frontage is 90 feet. The property is non-conforming as it has 8,829 square feet of area. And both front yard setbacks are also non-conforming. The primary front yard on Carter Street is set back 6.7 feet, and the secondary front yard on Eagle Street is set back 11.3 feet. It's conforming in all other respects, and as you'll see in a little bit, it's a pretty big lot for the Carter Street, Eagle Street area, particularly Carter Street. The proposal includes adding over 500 square foot floor area to the structure. And because it has non-conforming area, we require a special permit. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So just to orient you, this is from Eagle Street traveling west. And you can see the side of the house there. Next slide, please. And this is the back corner of the backyard. The addition we're going to talk about in a little bit is going to go essentially over where that existing deck is and out a little bit, and then the porch will extend a little bit to the right and kind of fill in that gap or that corner where the existing home and the earlier addition is, which, by the way, is probably close to part of the original structure. It does appear on the early Sanborn maps, which we're going to go over in a little bit. Next slide, please. And then here's another view of the backyard. Next slide, please. And this is directly in the back. The addition, which Eileen will go over in a little bit, is going to step in from the side of this lot line, so we don't extend or intensify the side yard, but we do extend it a little bit, but it will be stepped in. Next slide, please. And again, this is a front corner of the house. This section of the house will not be impacted. Next slide, please. And this is across the street at the corner of Carter and Eagle Street. And next slide. And this is the Carter Street side. And so the addition is going to go where that fence is on the left, except for it will be stepped in a little bit. Next slide, please. And this is looking up Carter as you're traveling toward High. The addition will be in the back behind that fence and actually stepped in. The application requires a special permit from nonconformities for extending the primary front yard setback on Carter Street. The structure will be 7.9 feet from the primary front yard boundary on Carter Street, where the existing is 6.7. Additionally, the proposed addition will add 521 square feet on the lot that is non-conforming for area, as I indicated. Otherwise, all of the dimensional requirements continue to be met, albeit except for the front yard setback, which we're not impacting in the lot area. The DCOD will not be triggered as we're removing less than 25% of the existing walls. In fact, we're removing 14%. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Oops, sorry, I missed this. This is going up Carter Street. And next, please. And then this is across on Eagle Street. And then we have a Sanborn map. And you can see the existing structure from 1894. There was a later added, there was earlier addition in the back there. I'm not really sure what that was, but you can see the addition that exists right now, which we're not taking down. Next slide, please. And I've already gone over this. And the next slide. So here's the site plan. And I think if you could blow up the plan itself a little bit, Caitlin. You can see in the lighter line, you can see the existing deck. So you can see we kind of follow the deck around on the outer left-hand edge and in the rear. And then you can see the line of the deck that comes to meet the house, and you'll see how the addition actually extends a little bit out from that. And beyond that, you'll see the proposed enclosed porch in the rear. You can see that nothing in the front of those gardens in that parking area along Eagle Street are being impacted. And the next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So what the proposal is here, if you could see on the top two drawings, is representing the existing structure as it is now. As Lisa had pointed out, the structure that, and you saw in photographs as well, that piece that you see on the back is part of the original structure, and that will stay intact. And as you look to the bottom two drawings, our proposal is to add living space on the first floor level in a one-story aspect that will help provide modern day needs of mudroom, of kitchen, etc. And taking the approach that it is more of a sunroom in feel, but in fact it's, as mentioned, kitchen needs inside. So you can see that that skirts in front of that sort of 2.5 lower level two-story there, and that in front of it, and as well as to the right of it as we view it from this direction. The lower roof, flat roof section on the far right, closer to the title block on the bottom, it represents the screen porch that will be added as well. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Likewise, from the rear, on the top left is the existing, and on the bottom left is the proposed. As mentioned, that if you looked at the bottom left drawing, that right side of the house is the side that travels along Carter. And so that is where you can best see that the step in with the addition, it steps in 2 feet from that plane of the existing structure. And then on the bottom right side, you can also see that sort of one-story piece is actually that 2-foot jog that I'm talking about, that corner board that you see on the existing structure. That next plane of the addition pushes in 2 feet, and then the screen porch as well. And if I could also just point out on the drawing above, that top right, that lower level there is to represent the existing deck. So I want to sort of call that out again, as that's the area in which we were putting the structure. So that when we look back to the site plan, you could see that it was our intent not to creep more than that. And if I could actually, do you mind, Caitlin, going back to one slide prior? What I wanted to point out there on the bottom left drawing is the addition to the right of the original structure is extending into the yard. There you can see it at the bottom left, and that is extending 9 feet towards the yard. Again, it's a large parcel for this area. So the change in footprint is relatively minimal for such a large lot. But we did want to bring sort of a different roof line there so that we could connect between the two structures without causing conflict to windows above, etc. We want to wrap it with similar windows. That's what's in there now, of the Marvin line, is that correct? So high-end windows there with some paneling below. For most of the building, it's from these two sides, you don't see any siding, but yet when we go to the next slide, Caitlin, going back to that one, you see a little bit on the streets, Carter Street side, and that would be clavards to match the existing structure.
If you could go back up to the site plan a minute, Caitlin, I think, again, just to highlight Eileen's comment about the jog, if you will, in the back, the 2 feet in. So you can see the proposed addition in the dark line coming off that rear original addition of the house. And then even further into the yard, you'll see this, the screened in porch. So it certainly is not on the same plane as you travel down Carter Street. Obviously, it's hard to see on those flat drawings, but it certainly steps significantly back. And then you could go to the rendering, perhaps that's
Correct, yes. So here is a rendering seen from the Eagle Street across the street, looking towards the north. And you can see that sunroom feel of the one-story addition. They're wrapping the back corner of the structure. And that is, again, deeper in the property to emphasize, the sort of impact. It is a wider opening between the existing house and that garage structure. But everything on the original structure stays pure in its existing form. So with that, I will pass it back to Lisa.
Thank you. So the 2 criteria the board need to consider when determining whether or not to grant a special permit for nonconformities is whether any new addition of a new nonconformity will be created. In this instance, no new nonconformity will be created. The Carter Street side primary front yard setback will be lengthened, but not to the same extent. It's stepped out further, 2 feet further than the existing setback. And the next criteria is that the proposed change will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the pre-existing non-conforming structure. Here, the proposed addition adheres to the dimensional requirements apart from that carry down on Carter Street, and stylistically fits in with the main portion of the structure as Eileen has described. The structure will remain conforming to side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, open space, lot coverage, building height, and parking requirements. It's of note, which we're going to show in a minute. If you could go to the My Maps up there just for a second, you can see the size of this lot as compared to the other single-family home lots in the area. The lot is comparably larger than the immediate neighborhood, and the gardens and the view of Eagle Street will remain largely unchanged, but for the view of the small portion of the proposed addition. We think that the rendering helps show how that, if you could go back to the rendering, Caitlin, the rendering shows how that addition is at the back and away from certainly the front of the house and doesn't disrupt those 2 main views of the home. Again, the structure that's in proposed addition will continue to neither be the largest nor the smallest in the neighborhood. There are many properties that appear to exceed lot coverage maximums and open space maximums, where this property will remain well in conformity with 17% lot coverage proposed, where 25% is the maximum, and 74.6% open space, where 40% is the minimum required. The use remains a single-family home. There are multifamily homes surrounding this, as you know, up on the corner of Carter and High, and then the strip of homes, townhouses, if you will, down Carter as well. A number of 2-family homes as well on the Carter Street, Warren Street area. Taking that all into consideration and noting that the term substantially means to a great or significant extent, we believe that the board has enough to find that the proposed addition is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. You have received 4 abutters letters. There are 3, the immediate abutters, which are the one on Carter Street immediately to the north, and then the 2 on one on Eagle Street immediately to the east, and then one down on Warren Street, and then the other one on Eagle Street. So the 3 immediate abutters and then an additional one have provided letters of support. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Mead, for that presentation. So unless there's anything further, we'll close the presentation portion of the public hearing and go to public comment. Ms. Sullivan will put up the slide for anyone remote. And we will not necessarily be taking public comment in pro or con, just simply public comment. As I think everyone in this room knows, it is, we just need name and address so that Ms. Joy can record that in the minutes. Anyone who wishes to speak in connection with the application in the room will go within the room first. Anyone seeing no hands, anyone wish to speak in connection with the application online? Caitlin, I can't see any.
No hands at this time.
Okay. And I'm having trouble just seeing the attendees that are logged in. Can you open that screen real quick? I just want to see, but yeah, to the right. Just down that where it says attendees. Click on-
These are them right here.
That's it. Okay, great. That's all right. I just wanted to make sure I'm missing something. Seeing no hands either online or in the room. Going once, going twice, we will close public comment section and go into questions from the board. We'll begin to my left with Mr. Swan.
Thank you. Could you put up slide 8? I'm familiar with this area and running the street. I had it right on the street until recently. And this is obviously a very big lot, a very pretty house.
Thank you.
But I've always thought of this house as on Eagle Street, and when you look at it from this angle, it kind of looks like it fronts on Eagle Street. I don't know, it is 26 Eagle Street.
Yeah, right.
There's no door on one side. I don't,
So the, probably 6 years ago, right, the definition of front yard changed.
It's long, it's long.
That's right. So the Carter Street side is longer, so that becomes the primary front yard, but Eagle Street is still a front yard.
All right, just trying to
So
get
that's how you determine your side.
clarity on that,
Right,
because I always thought of that house as
No, for sure. Right. That's definitely the front of the house on Eagle Street.
parking the driveway, it's kind of closer. to the-
Right, and the other main entrance is on the Eagle Street side off the driveway. You are correct, Mr. Swan.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, which if you go to the site plans, would you, Taylor, could you put a site plan back up? And zoom in on the site plan there. We got a lot of proposals for additions on the back of the building. You bring it in, you've done it. Attorney. And we often approve them when they're kind of out back. The challenge here is you're on a corner lot, so out back is on Carter Street. I guess my question is, you're at 7.9 feet, I think. At that new corner up there, it's hard to read because the screen's a little blurry, but and very small. But you have a very big lot with a lot of room, and you're only like 2 feet 1 inch away from having a 10-foot setback there. Have you, which would have less impact on the street line to have it more like more traditional side lot setback of 10 feet. I realize it's not a side lot, they're both front lots. I realize they're really conforming, you're gonna be 25 feet back. I'm not suggesting that. But I guess what I'm wondering is, do you consider being not quite so close to the road, because you're extending a pretty long building right along the road. And we don't really get a lot of those. So that's my question. Have you looked at what it would take to be 10 feet off rather than 7.9, you know?
Right, so it's a good question. So, what was important in this sort of integration of the addition with the existing is that little back rear nub, we'll call it, is the existing kitchen space. And we knew we wanted to integrate that living space. So the more we push into the yard, the more it makes it a sort of cumbersome connection and use of that room. And currently in its layout, it really does absorb that, and it's still part of the kitchen, but it gets expanded. you start to shift it, and it just makes it more challenging in the use. Definitely a good question, but 2 more feet, pushing it back of a 1-story seems, I understand your point for the Carter Street elevation, but actually currently there's a pretty large fence there. I feel like for a 1-story flat roof, roughly, 11 feet tall, 12 feet tall, it's a pretty minimal presence on that experience from the sidewalk.
Okay,
So
thank you.
what we
That's my only
thought.
question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I guess this is somewhat of a nonsense question. I guess I'll ask every meet. Typically, it's very helpful to have some pictorial evidence of the houses nearby, so I can make a fair assessment of this scale and mass of the structure and the addition as it relates to the other homes in the neighborhood. So I just ask you to talk about that a bit.
Sure, if we can go to, trying to think if there's some, Eagle Street shots here. Once you go to the photographs from the beginning, yeah, why don't you start wherever you want to start. So you see the house across the street, Mr. Bennett?
Yes, thank you.
And the one directly beside it, you can see it's got a pretty good size addition that's 2 stories that runs off the back and well into the road, well into the lot. Once you pick a next slide, there you go, try that one. So there's another view, and you can see this house is down Eagle Street. Mr. Bennett, they're also 2-story, pretty good size. You can see in the backyard in this one, you see the side of the house behind it, immediately adjacent on Carter Street. I don't know if we have another slide that has that picture coming up Carter Street. Why don't you just start at the beginning of these photos? You can see across the street on Carter Street, you see I think that's actually a 2-family, that gray one. Next slide. And then you can see you can see the house to the left of this. It's also on Carter Street. Next slide, please. And that's that same house on Carter Street, with the 2 dormers on the top. Next slide, please. No, keep going. You can see a little bit in the back. Carter Street drops a little bit as you go downhill, starting there. So I'm not sure, that's a 2-story house in the back. Is that a 2-story house?
That's a 2-story house.
Yeah.
With 1 story, and then the eaved story is the 2nd story.
Yeah. The next slide, please. There you can see a little bit better view that we looked at that a little bit ago. You can see on down Eagle Street. Next slide, please. And that's a little tougher. Next slide. It's a little broader view. I think we looked at that a minute ago. The house across the street there on Carter, that runs all the way up to High. It's actually a multiple group of different townhomes that are all connected running up to High. Next slide, please. There we go. There's that. You can see that view. And the next slide. There you go. That's a little broader view from the street. But I'll keep that in mind for our next presentations, to try to get some broader views of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Chen.
Yeah, thank you. Could you go over the zoning matrix again? I think some of the numbers different from the way you spoke. It's probably a moot point, but
Is there one in particular you are?
both the lot coverage and the open space.
So, Caitlin, could you just blow up Everett's plan?
I mean, it's just. in
So
numbers,
the
but
open
just-
space, minimum open space is 40 and it's 71.4.
Yeah.
And the lot coverage minimum is 25 and it's existing is 14.4 and the proposed is 20.2.
Okay, so those are the correct numbers that are on that
Yeah,
matrix.
yes.
Okay, I think during your presentation, some of the numbers were different.
All right,
But
but
That's-
those are certainly correct.
perfect. And then the next one was, and I think it's obvious on the drawing, but it was hard to see on the sketches. Is the screen porch stepped in from
Yes.
both sides? So in other words, it's narrower than,
Correct.
okay,
That's correct.
Again, if you could
yes.
blow up the site
so if we
plan.
were to look at it from the, I guess, the rear of the house,
Correct.
it's smaller, it's subordinate to the main
Subordinate
okay.
to the
addition.
one-story addition.
Okay.
living space.
That's all I had, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shannon. Ms. Scott.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Ms. Graff, I think you touched on this, that the fence will remain, fence on that
Mhm.
Carter Street side. Okay. And then just a question out of curiosity, how are you gonna move the water off those flat roofs?
Well, anytime there are these flat roofs, there's still pitch to it.
Yeah,
So it will be rubber, but we will pitch them away, away to a good drainage point that's not dropping on people's heads. So we'll be intentional on where it's coming down, but it will pitch. Have pitch to it, yeah.
got it. Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Beckman.
Yes, I am also a corner lot purist, but I saw the August drawings. And I'm really intrigued with how you solved that problem of not having the height and the massing right there.
Mhm.
And I know you're adding 521 square feet. Do you happen to remember how many square feet were to be added in the August plan?
Well, it was more than 500 because we were still having to get a special permit, right? So
So was it really close, probably? I don't need to know this. I'm just really intrigued by, again, I think you solved the problem there and. You know, that left side, is it left side A left was going from 40 to 29 and now it's going from 40 to 16.1, but I'm imagining that's maybe less intrusive on the streetscape and maybe on that 51 prospect. So I think it's a really interesting.
Eileen and Francesca worked really hard
Yeah.
at revising these
Yeah.
drawings.
Cause when I saw the August plan, I anticipated some. Pushback, maybe either from a butters or the.
Yeah.
Historical here, but. If it's comparable, that's good. It's very intriguing to me and it is a lovely house.
And we feel
You're
very
garden.
strongly that it completely historically in keeping with the house and not intrusive to the neighbors, the neighborhood, so. Tried to make that a focus.
So I don't have the number with me,
Okay, but thank you.
but it would have been
No,
over 500.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. I don't have any additional questions other than what's been asked and answered, so thank you. And unless there's any other questions from any members of the ZBA, I will close that portion of the public hearing. And we'll move into deliberations. And again, as the board knows, this is a special permit for non-conformity, so our deliberations kindly govern them in and around section 9B2, the criteria for special permit. And, with that, we'll begin with Mr. Swanson.
Oh, well, as it's been said, there are no new non-conformities. So that comes down to whether this is substantially more detrimental than what's there. You know, my primary concern is around what I brought up about the extending this long building on Carter Street. You know, through the wonders of Google Maps here, I can see the other neighbors looking down the street there, and a lot of the houses are very small in that area, and it will have an impact. On the other hand, it is one story, has a flat roof, and there's a high fence. And that does certainly mitigate it. It's also quite tasteful, but we're not supposed to be judging on taste.
It helps though.
It does. Yeah, it does. So I'm sort of, at this point, unless I hear something very different from my colleagues that means me otherwise, I'm sort of leaning in support of this special permit.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Swanson's observation. This is a large lot. Let's see. I guess the open space and lot coverage are comfortably met here. I too am impressed with the architectural solution here as it relates to kind of this setback structure flat roof, I think it integrates and is coherent with what is a very special home for sure. I believe that although there is some concern about stretching a structure of this size down Carter Street, at the end of the day, I do not believe that brings a substantial detriment to the neighborhood. And in fact, given its architectural elements, I find it that is on balance a fine addition to the neighborhood and to the streets. So I would support.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Chen.
I don't think I can say it better. Well crafted. I also was a little concerned when I first saw the application about, it running down Carter, but the fact that it's one story, it's subordinate to the main building. Even the screen porch is subordinate to the addition, it just flows well, and I can support the application.
Okay, Ms. Scott.
I would agree with my fellow members here. I think also the size of the lot being as large as it is, and I'm familiar with the neighborhood, and I don't see it as being substantially detrimental to the neighborhood.
Mr. Lyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree also. I think this looks like a really nice project. I can support this.
And Ms. Peck.
Likewise, and again, I'm really impressed with what you did after August to kind of get that space in without going up.
Thank you. I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and the design is really thoughtful and it's coherent. I think members of the ZBA said exactly that. And it's nice to see. So the extension doesn't raise any eyebrows from my seat. And I think it's just all appropriate, massive scale, vernacular, and architectural sort of and so well done. And if there's any further deliberations, finally, none, we will close the deliberations portion of the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion to approve by a member of the ZBA, and if there are any conditions, we can note them. And actually, before we do that, I just want to make one note for the record, as we'll tend to do this every time, but we shouldn't have been doing it all along. We want to make a note on the record that the project, while almost every project may trigger the street and tree ordinance in the report, we reach out almost every time, though the planning office does, to our acting DPS director, Jamie Piccolo, and in this case, Mr. Piccolo has done a site visit. Believes the existing trees have been recently removed because of failing health, and that there is no replacement required or recommended, and that the sidewalks are in good shape. So there's no attention that this board is being asked to take with respect to the sidewalk and tree ordinance. And having noted that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to move that we approve the special permit for non-conformities for 26 Eagle Street, which is number 22-23.
Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Shagnon.
All right, motion is made and seconded. And it'll be just a moment. We will call the roll. All right, motion made and seconded on the motion to approve. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Shagnon,
Mr. Shagnon. Thank you.
Yes.
And Mr. Lot.
Yes.
Suspected. You're not voting this. And Rob, somebody, I vote yes. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving now to 11 Purchase Street. This is the application.
Then, did you forget Hale Street?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't want to skip
Don't do that.
The next application in the agenda, thank you. Sorry.
That's right.
Is the application of Hale Business Park LLC, care of Lisa Mead Retailer and Costa LLC, 21 Hale Street, also known as 21 Malcolm Point Road. This is a variance, docket 22-5, to construct an industrial services building within the front yard setback. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Lisa Mead, Teller and Costa, on behalf of the Hale Business Park LLC, and with me this evening is Craig Bucina and Patrick Reddy of the LLC. Also, Tom Hughes, I think I saw him on there, so you might want to let him in, or however that goes. I'm not really sure. This is, as the chair suggested, we're here to request a variance for front yard setback on Hale Street. The proposal is to construct a small industrial services building. I'm gonna wait till, there we go. Then you go on to the next slide. Small industrial service building on a property which consists of over 290,000 square feet of area. The building itself will be 2 stories, but will have a footprint of only 2,880 square feet. So the total usable space in the building will be 55,760 square feet. The building will front on the property adjacent to Hale Street. The use is allowed by right. The structure is located within the front yard setback of 20.1 feet, where 60 feet is required due to the present. We're locating it there due to the presence of resource area and buffer zone on the remainder of the lot. The lot being developed, which we're going to see in a little bit, is lot A3 to be created and will include 54,530 square feet, where 50,000 square feet is required, and will include 200 feet of frontage on Hale Street. I just want to say this before we get to the site plan. The creation of 2 individual lots out of this one does not impact the wetlands area and the relief that we're seeking, and I'll go over that with you in a minute. We're dividing the lot so that we can convey a portion of the lot to the Conservation Commission. So whether we were dividing the lot or not, we would still need relief for the front yard setback due to the 25-foot no disturb zone directly behind the construction that's going to be happening, which we'll go over in a minute. The remainder of the parcel, which will be A4, is proposed to be donated to the Conservation Commission, and it includes 236,321 square feet. So the majority of the lot, as you can see, will be going to the Conservation Commission. The remainder of our lot, the remainder lot, if you will, or the proposed to be developed lot, does meet all other dimensional requirements of the ordinance. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And we've gone over that, so if you go to the next slide. So here, what you can see is the full property. So this is Malcolm Point Drive. So if you're going on Hale Street, Low Street is on your right on this plan. So you're going down Hale Street, you have Malcolm Point Drive. This is the corner of Malcolm Point Drive and Hale Street. As Malcolm Point Drive comes down, it turns. And so this is the corner. You can see the rear of the lot. So the proposed lot that we're creating is up front, and I'm actually going to get to use my little red pointer. Maybe works. So here's the new lot line right here. So this is the lot we're creating, and this is the remainder lot that goes to the Conservation Commission. So you can see there's a little piece that's on Hale Street, then it comes down along Malcolm Point Drive and goes to the Conservation Commission. If you go to the next slide, please. And here is the lot blown up. Now I'm going to tell you that in a later plan, we're going to show you where the wetlands resource area is. We have not had a chance to update the later plan, but you'll see the fire department asked for access all around this property. So we had to add a drive to the right. It doesn't affect our front yard setback. But when I show you the wetlands line, you'll see that that drive doesn't exist. It's where the original plan, which had the building over a little bit. But the fire department wanted an egress on both sides of the building, so we had to add a drive, and so we filed this with the board. The applicants have been meeting with the Conservation Commission on this proposal for well over 6 months. Initially, we did informally, we met with them. They've gone out to take a site visit. We had a lot of conversations about the lot and how we could at least try to get some use out of the 7 acres so that there would, essentially Craig and Patrick would have a modicum of use based upon what you could actually do in the industrial park. And that's how we came up with this agreement to try to push it out of the 25-foot no disturb and seek a variance, make the building footprint as small as we possibly could, and then provide the rest of the area to the Conservation Commission. This project will also have to go through site plan review with the planning board. So if the board is so inclined to grant the variance, we'll go back to the Conservation Commission to make sure they're okay with this second driveway as it's located. We'll continue that, and then we'll file our site plan review with the planning board to deal with all the site plan review issues. If you could go to the next slide, please. One of the concerns, or not concerns, but one of the things that the developers wanted to make sure that they were sympathetic to is that in this area on Hale Street on the opposite side, we start to have some houses moving down. And so while this is going to be an industrial building, we're facing Hale Street with 3 doors that you would see on any other kind of residential building, and some windows to be respectful of that as well. And the footprint is 2,880 square feet. So it's not a giant building as compared to other houses in total, if you think about it. So that, and when you compare it to the lot itself, it's going to be small compared to other industrial buildings in the area. Next slide, please. And then here's the rear of it. So you can see the rear garages. And the next slide, please. So here is a GIS view of it. So you can see the arrow on the left-hand side where the building is going to go. And how big is the industrial building, the footprint of the existing? Do you know that?
The building,
Yeah,
it's 160 by 192.
It's 16,000.
so it's square from the footprint,
It's 14,000. It's
the footprint.
Yes.
So the footprint is
Trying to do the math.
14,000 on that building. And this footprint is going to be 2,880, right? So you can, I just wanted to show you that from a perspective. In this picture also, you can see that so there's an upland right here where we're proposing to put the structure. And then the only other upland on this property is this little, there's a piece right back in here that you can't get to from the road because you have to do a crossing. So that's the other hardship back here. So you can't develop this upland here unless you were to come in and buy this property over here and go that way. But this has some significant wildlife habitat in it, which is one of the reasons the Conservation Commission is interested in this proposal. So the only uplands you have are here, which is really pushed, and then this upland back here, which you can't get to. So in accordance with section, if you can go to the next slide, please. In accordance with section 10H6 of the zoning ordinance in 48, section 10, of course, in order to grant a variance, the board has to find a hardship. In this instance, the hardship is related to the soil condition. As I said, the front portion of the property is the only upland that exists. The remainder of the property is either resource area, wetlands, and or buffer zones, or any other protected areas that would need to be significantly impacted in order to access the only remaining upland on the property, which is in that back southeast corner. Soil condition is wetlands are considered a soil condition that would be acceptable to find a variance under. There's a case of Boudreau versus the Chelmsford Zoning Board of Appeals, where the land court, Judge Foster, upheld the ZBA grant of a variance, allowing the creation of a non-conforming side yard setback, where the lot was essentially covered with wetlands, and that was the only usable area on the lot. Here, the soil conditions and exceptional physical situations prevent the applicant from locating the building at the required front yard setback. The property in total, as I said, is 290,851 square feet. The applicant is proposing to use less than a quarter of it for the buildable lot itself. The 3/4 will be turned over to the Conservation Commission. The developed portion of the property is even smaller. The applicant's lot coverage will only be 5.3% on that lot, where 30% is allowed by the district. In addition to that, the building itself is going to be 0.05% of the 54,000 square foot lot. So it's very small. While there's certainly other wetlands on adjacent parcels in the industrial park, this property is unique given its size and the fact that the only 2 upland areas are either at the front adjacent to Hale Street within the front yard setback, or that southeast rear portion that's not accessible. If the board were to impose the strict application of the ordinance, the applicant would be deprived of even the most modicum use of this property and would be unable to use the parcel which is almost 7 acres of land. Alternatively, the natural resources on the site would be significantly impacted if the site could be used at all. The conditions of the property are not the imposition of the applicant, rather they are the wetlands resource area. As I said earlier, dividing the lot in order to convey part of it to the Conservation Commission does not cause this hardship. Finally, if relief is granted, it will not be a special privilege to the applicant. Indeed, here the applicant is trying to modestly use an almost 7-acre parcel of land. I guess I would go to the next slide, please. And the next slide. So here is the wetlands line, as I said earlier, before we put the driveway in over here. But if you look at this, this line right here, this is the 25-foot no touch. And that truly means no touch, this blue dotted line right here. And so there can't be any soil disturbance. So this is stormwater right here, and that's stormwater excavation, and then this is the parking. And so the Conservation Commission, you see how close it gets here, that's why this goes up like that. That's actually something we can't touch. And so that's why you see the building pushed up into the 21-foot area. I would say, as I've said in my filing, that the travel path is out here, and it's actually about 40 feet away from the travel path. So even though it's 21 feet away from the property line, it's about 40 feet away from the travel path on Hale Street. Again, it can't be pushed back anymore because it is this 25-foot no touch zone. That's only one of all of these other lines through here. These are all other wetlands lines that we're working through waivers with the Conservation Commission. These are setback buffer zone areas as well. And there's the entire area is buffer zone. The entire lot is a buffer zone. So with that, we'd request that the board grant a variance for the setback in accordance with the plan. If you go to the next slide, it might be helpful too, maybe. So here you can see this is just another aerial view of the site. And I think that's probably it for right now. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer your questions, and we'd request a grant of a variance.
Thank you, Attorney. Closing that portion of the public hearing, we will go into public comment. And we'll begin with public comment in the room, and I'll just go around and see if there's anyone who wishes to speak in connection with the application. If so, just make yourself known and give your name and address. Being only those whom I know to be here for the business of this evening, I don't see any members of the public, but going once, going twice, seeing no hands, we'll now go online. Anyone who wishes to speak in connection with the application, if you're tuning in via Zoom, just kindly raise your hand and we'll recognize you and just give your name and address. Seeing no hands among attendees logged in via Zoom, going once, going twice, I will go ahead and close that portion of the public hearing. And we'll go right into questions from the board, and we will go ahead and just begin questions from the board. Who does anyone, and let me do this actually, because we've talked about this in the past, but is there any member of the ZBA without me continuing to do the same sequence that wishes to speak first in connection with questions? I'm going to put that out there. If not, just one.
Okay, yeah, this, what's on the wall here, the green, I guess that's the lot today, before it's divided into two, the part that's going to the Conservation Commission.
Correct.
You show, and you do make a compelling case that this, one of the things for variance is the soils, and there's a lot of wetlands here. You showed a wetlands map of the small piece at the top there near the road. You don't happen to have one that shows the wetlands on the other? Could you just talk to?
Just for you, I have one, Mr. Swanton. If you can go to the last slide, I think, there we go. So this is not as pretty, and it's before the building, the industrial building that sits right here right now, the 14,000 square foot industrial building.
Okay.
So the other one's easier to read because it's in color, right? So here's the uplands in the back I was talking about.
Yeah.
And here's the uplands that we're proposing to put it on.
Yeah.
This is approximately the 25-foot no touch. and I'm reading this from very far away. And then there's a stream that comes through here, like this. And so everything else is buffer zone and or other wetland resource areas.
So just those two uplands. those
Yes.
Two big areas.
This
between
is-
The uplands and the stream, those
Right.
are all wet as well.
That's correct.
I see. Okay, well, that's a very good answer. I'm glad you have that map. You mentioned it's the parcel you're giving to the conservation is 236,321 feet. I tend to think in acres. That's like over 5 acres.
That's correct.
Yeah. And just, Caitlin, do you happen to, did you confirm, you've heard anything from the Conservation Commission that they actually want this land? I don't know if that's,
Can I answer? So we wouldn't be here if the
Yeah.
Conservation Commission, so we've been working with them for a while.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be here if they didn't want the land,
Okay.
because otherwise the project, that doesn't work, right? So they want the land because of a couple of reasons. There's flood storage in here for the industrial park.
Yeah.
That they're gonna be able to use. This upland back here, could be accessed by this property if they bought it to extend this if they wanted. But more importantly, this upland back here has wildlife resources in it, wildlife habitat that is unusual in the park. And so they also want it for that reason. And so that's why they're interested in it.
how firm is the obligation here? I mean, we could give you a variance, they could give you everything, and you could just keep all the land.
Well, wouldn't it? Yeah, no, we wouldn't, because the Conservation Commission wouldn't approve the order conditions, but we're happy to have you condition your grant of the variance that we convey the land in accordance with the Conservation Commission decision or whatever you want. It's not. But we don't have any qualms about that whatsoever.
I mean, generally speaking, I have a hard time with variances, but I think we've done several things in this case. As far as the building's quite small, it's actually set back more from what you think of as the road, and you mentioned this in your talk.
Right.
And I thought it was rather tastefully done for all the residents across the street, as far as what it looks like. So that kind of mitigates it for me. I guess I have no more questions, therefore, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett.
In your package there, Attorney Mead, there's an aerial photo. Could we put that on screen? Yeah, I think that's the same one that I'm looking at. There it is.
Yeah, there might be two.
I think that's the one I'm looking at.
Okay,
Let's work off that one. since
Sure.
That's the one in front of me. So I would just, if you would. I'll start this by saying, I mean, in the abstract, you've met the criteria for a variance. The question is, how big should the variance be? And this is asking for a significant variance of 40 feet. So I guess I'm trying to understand who's around there, who are the neighbors in that area, where are the buildings, what are the structures? And to Mr. Swan's point, I think you mentioned this notion of the travel path, and I'd like you to expand upon that, please, as it relates to the factors that should be meaningful when we try to vary front yard by such a significant area.
sure, absolutely. So this is an industrial condominium here. And Patrick and Craig are sitting right here. They own one or two of the units there, but that's owned by an association, of course. This is a church.
That's Rochester.
Oh, excuse me, that's
Rochester.
Rochester Electronics.
Okay, I'm sorry, the first building,
This
Yes.
is
what is that again?
it's an
Hale
industrial
Street.
condominium,
Sorry.
Hale Street Industrial
Okay.
Condominiums.
And
And these are all
generally
industrial.
speaking, what types of activities are?
So they're the contractors who have, they like have all their storage in like units in there. There's a couple of people that run like, it could be even light manufacturing in, but so how many units are there? Eight units there. This is Rochester Electronics.
Okay.
All these people, of course, got notices of this hearing, right? And then this is a single family home here. And single family homes back here and back here. So the only one right across the street is right here. And then that would be at the corner of Malcolm Hoyt and Hale Street. So if you could go to the wetlands law, the pretty one, yeah, there we go. So, I agree with you, Mr. Bennett, 40 feet is a lot to ask for in a variance. However, here, it is impossible to move the building down because you interfere with this 25-foot no touch. So these other lines, we can accomplish, we can get certain waivers from, depending on how we do construction from the Conservation Commission. We cannot get a waiver from the 25-foot no touch. And so we can't move it back because you can see that we have constructed stormwater right up as close as we can to it. And you're not allowed to even alter the soil.
I mean, I understand that, and I accept that. I guess my question is, that's all well and good, but. What I am looking at are the factors which would have prompted the city council to adopt the 60-foot setback here. And
Sure.
why we should depart from that so significantly here, and what factors I should be guided by in making that decision.
Sure. So again, the reason we have a variance, right, is that when there are exceptional circumstances related to shape topography or soil condition, in this instance, soil condition, a person can't use their property essentially,
Wait a second.
right?
The question is, why should we give you a 40-foot variance? What are the factors that I should be thinking about when you are getting within 20 feet of the road?
Sure.
That's the issue. I
So,
understand the reasons and all that. Please address that if you can.
okay, I was gonna go through them. but
Okay,
I'll
but
go
you don't need to
backwards.
go through the
Okay.
criteria. I'm
So,
familiar.
yeah, so the travel path is a little over 40 feet from the front of the building. So there's 21 feet-ish, I don't have the exact number in front of me, there's 21 feet to the property line. But then there's a little over another 20 feet to the travel path. Typically, these buildings would be much larger. In the industrial park. The height limitation is 40 feet, I believe. And this building is 30. We have it on one of the plans. If you could go to the elevation plan. And can you, does that say 35?
It's 25.
25 feet. So we're at 25 feet, so we have it much more feeling like a residential home, which in Newburyport, the furthest distance of a residential home front yard setback is 25 feet. So we have it smaller than what industrial buildings are typically allowed to be in the industrial park, both on height and massing. This is a much smaller building, as it sits broadside on the street. It is less than a half, like a quarter of the size of the building next door to it. So it has a much more residential feel and is less imposing on the street itself, which I presume are part of the reasons for the dimensional requirements.
That's right.
Thank you.
I have nothing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Chen.
Yeah, for me, I guess the hurdle we have to get over is the hardship. So I wanted to just review the hardship. Why the building couldn't go on the second upland area is I think it's in 2 slides down. Yeah, that one. Is the stream the thing that's running diagonally across?
Right
the
here,
property?
this is the stream. So you'll
Okay.
see that
So
this,
you-
lot touches the road right here.
Right, so if you
So
come in there,
You have to come in here, cross the
you'd
stream
have to jump the stream.
to get over to the uplands.
Okay, and that's not acceptable to the Conservation Commission?
No, crossing a stream is not a good thing at all.
Even with a culvert?
No, you definitely can't use a culvert. There would have to be some significant relief, because you're not just talking about crossing the stream. All of the resource areas around the stream, you've got the bank and the impact on the bank and whatever
Yeah.
you build there, not just the stream itself. Plus, there's a no-touch zone around both sides of the stream bed itself and the banks.
Okay, that satisfies my curiosity. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Scout.
The home across the street. Any idea what that setback is?
I can't,
I'd say it's probably like 20 feet. I mean,
here's the property line right here.
So it's gonna be 40 feet, probably the property line, probably about the same from what we're looking at, 40 feet to the street.
I think this kind of goes to the point that was just being made about what's the reason for the setback for the industrial, right? And it's probably to protect the neighboring properties. But it's very interesting how you've designed the property to look like.
Yeah, and part of that design also, I mean, interrupt real quick, is to not allow semi-tractor trailers to be able to get around in there, so there's no loading dock. I know it's always a concern on Hale Street, they don't like the semi-tractor that goes into the industrial park. So we designed it so it, the tractor trailer cannot fit back there, so we can't deliver it back there. We try to design it, even though it's an industrial building, it looks somewhat residential, a little less of an impact. I mean, if you look up and down the street, they're all big giant buildings, but you know, this is we're using 2,800 plus or minus square feet. Similar to a house, basically, and we thought we'd make a little residential looking, at least in the front. Nobody can see except the industrial park in the back. The big drive thing. Part of the idea of fitting into the neighborhood.
And do you have an idea about what you would use the building for? Is it something that yours, for example,
It's-
to neighbors who are
Yeah,
close?
so what we have currently in the other building are contractors, because each unit has an office and it has so there's small contractors, electricians, and they need a place to store their equipment, and they need a little office space, and it's a popular and hard to find item in Newburyport. It's hard to find that kind of, I need an office and I need not a yard to store stuff in, but I need a weatherproof building to store my material in. So we thought, because the other building is completely full, very little of it. And we thought that would be a good low impact use, because it's not really, there's light manufacturing. I mean, really light in some of these, but mostly it's just, contractors warehouse. There are some businesses in there that do other things, but it has to be allowed by.
Right, but you don't anticipate anything that's going to be a lot of noise or sound, given that it's a little closer to the road than.
No, there's not that kind of truck traffic or any kind of manufacturing that would be heavy.
Anything, I imagine anything would have to be approved through the fire department to be in there anyway, so.
Mhm.
Anything with any kind of, venting and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, because of the 8 units in the other one, there's no noise impact at all. We haven't had any complaints from the neighbors. Ever.
Thank you for the questions.
Okay, Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question about the building that we're talking about now, the building that exists. How did that lot come about?
Sure, so it was taken out, this whole piece existed
As one lot?
as one lot,
Okay,
and then that was taken out to build this one conforming lot.
and that's mostly upland?
That is upland there, right?
All right, that was my big question here, because one of our criteria is that the unique conditions and circumstances are not the result of actions of the applicant taken subsequent to the adoption of this chapter. So if you broke off all the uplands and left kind of a little bit of uplands here and a little bit of uplands there, and now you want to come in for a variance because you've got this little bit of uplands. That's not really what I wanted to hear. Okay, that's it.
Mr. Beckman.
Yeah, Ms. Scout asked my question. You mentioned wildlife habitat and conservation commission, and I was just curious about what kind of industrial services. Not the answer. Thank you.
All right, I don't have any questions that haven't been asked. I do reserve some deliberation comments, but I'm ready to get to that. And unless there's any other questions, we'll close the question from the board portion and go into deliberations. And
Can I ask one follow-up?
Yeah, sure.
Lots of questions. Just for a little bit more context on that. When you broke off the initial chunk to make the existing building, why did you do it the way you did it?
It was, if you recall, I don't know if you recall this, but back in the day, there were 2 lots. It was a rear and a front. So, yeah, it went that way. So we just took off the front uplands piece to build that building and then left the whole of the other lot. It wasn't done for any particular reason that way, it's just we wanted,
We just needed that amount of space for
we
that.
didn't want to take more space than we needed.
When you acquired that land, was it multiple lots that you acquired and then they merged together, or?
It was, I believe, two, it was referred to as 23 Malcolm Hoyt and 23 Malcolm Hoyt rear. It's a little sketchy on whether they're two separate lots, but that's how it was in the assessor's database.
Yeah.
And the lines seem to go right down the middle, yeah.
Just bisected
Yeah,
down the
yeah,
middle.
yeah. So what we did, we got rid of that line altogether, took
Yeah.
the minimum amount to make that building and kept the other 6 or 7 acres, whatever that turns out to be. It wasn't done for any
Yeah.
zoning purpose, it was just. I guess we don't know why we did it.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Can I just ask one follow-up?
Of course, yeah.
Following along that line of question, when was that? When did you carve off that? 2016?
16,
That's a guess, maybe 17. 2016 or 17? 2016.
I think it was some,
It might have been before that. I honestly.
I didn't, Craig and Patrick were represented by somebody else at the time, but I think it was, I wanna say that. Oh, there might be a date on on that original. I don't know, it was not in the last 3 years, that's for sure, but, Mr. Swan, I don't know the exact date.
Any other questions? Mr. Swan? Anyone else? Okay, I will close the questions from the board section and we will go into deliberations and again, deliberating the criteria of variance and we will begin with Mr. Swan. Right back at you. Does anyone mind if I'm gonna crack open the window? Yes, I'll be there. And sort of little there. Oh, we hold you up. Mr. Swan.
Yes.
All this-
I have a little bit of concern with the line of questioning that Lyle just brought up. In that, wasn't that many years ago, you had a whole lot here, you chopped off a piece, leaving yourself with something that's really hard to develop. On the other side of that, the building is very small. And you've made it sort of not look like an industrial building. Unless you drive behind it, which is bad. It is considerably closer to the road than previous building. Broke off. A factor for me is you're giving the Conservation Commission 5.4 acres, which also has an effect on the overall neighborhood there. And is commendable. So unless my colleagues come up with something I hadn't thought of, I lean toward approving this.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
Thanks. So, I see two prongs to this analysis. I guess the first one is, are the lot conditions, the soil, breathing, hardship here? The answer is yes. Secondly, I certainly believe that it is in the community's best interest to see 5+ acres of wetlands in the hands of the Conservation Commission. Who knows what happens in the next 10 years as goes on with that. That's a positive thing. For a host of reasons. So that I am trying to reach a conclusion regarding the scope of this request for variance, because despite the fact that there's a substantial hardship created by the soil itself, we still have to concern ourselves that this variance is still consistent with the intent or purpose of the ordinance. And purpose here is to have a 60% setback in this area. So factors that mitigate in favor of the variance, I think, are numerous buildings, like the size of the building. The nature of the building that, I understand that, please correct me up. I understand the building is separated into 3 distinct units, if you will, is that correct?
That's correct.
So that suggests that any activity there in each unit would have to be somewhat modest in scale and size. Therefore, the notion of being from the road is significant. The height of the building, the massing, the architecture, all mitigate in favor of any variance. So the point that the Lyle makes is an interesting one. And without some consideration here. But I view in balance that I find the criteria for the programs have been satisfied here based upon the size of the building and the other factors that are. So I can support this.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Shannon.
Yeah, I guess for me, getting over the soil conditions as a hardship, has been solved. I'm convinced that exists. So like my colleagues, the next question is, this is quite a good leap to go from 60 feet to 20 feet, but also looking at the lot and modest size of that building, I don't see how you could flip it around or twist it or move it somewhere else. And, you might be able to push it 5 feet from the street, but you're not gonna get 60. The building would be a long skinny thing, it'd be a bowling alley. And again, with, the addition of the landowner or the Conservation Commission, I can support it. I can get my head around the fact that it's close to the road, but it's a small building. It's gonna look and feel more like a home than it will a big industrial complex. So I can support it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shannon, Ms. Scow.
Well, I think I would echo a lot of the other comments. I do think that it's really important that the design has the residential feel. And the setback is pretty similar to the one, looked to me from, and you confirmed across the street. I think the proposed use, I know it's in the industrial park, but it seems like it's not going to be a noxious use being close to the road that people might really object to if it's closer than the usual setback. And I do think that it is really important. I think the views of the Conservation Commission on how you've divided this up, and it is, a nice fact for me that you've chosen to use the area that doesn't have the habitat in there. And so I'd be inclined to support it as well.
Mr. Delisle, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think there are certainly a lot of factors that militate in favor of granting the variance here. It is, it remains a large lot with the 2 upland sections, and with the substantial amount of wetlands that will be given over to the Conservation Commission. So that also militates in favor of a favorable result here, I think. It is interesting how the first lot was chipped out. But that being said, as we've heard from the presentation, there could be other ways into the other uplands, the other habitat. So I don't know that that this is a situation where it's created the chipping out of that initial lot created the hardship here. I think the hardship existed because the lot was, quite frankly, a whole bunch of wetlands to begin with. So I think that based on the analysis that we've heard from everyone here, I think that I can also support this project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Delisle, and Ms. Beckman.
Yes, I too appreciated Mr. Dwyer's questions and was satisfied with the response. And it's not only the acquisition of the wetlands that's in the community's best interest, but I think development, industrial park in general.
And thank you, Ms. Becker. I agree, and I think the board has done a really nice job, a very detailed and granular job in articulating reasons that buttress or reasons that address the criteria necessary to find for a board like this to find a hardship and thus favorably grant variance. And so it's not easy work, but when I look at this zone as well, and I think I probably said it all, and others have that. It's not so much an industrial zone as it is an enterprise zone, and we often use that language, and it's become kind of more in fashion now to speak of these sections of cities and towns as more of an enterprise zone versus strictly an industrial park, because that's not what it is. It's not how it behaves. I think it's malleable and it's evolving, as are the times, as should we. So when we're asked and called upon to grant something as rigid and static as a variance, at first glance, I think we're inclined to think, well, that's a really hard bar, and it is. But we're also a board of appeals, and our entire existence is epicentric to this notion that we apply empathy and a sort of a human lens, a real-time lens to that which is not human and very, academic. So we breathe life into this notion of evolution of our zoning and our districts and our areas so that they more align with how we live and how we behave and how we want these zones to function. I think this is a perfect adaptive. I know we overuse this phrase, adaptive reuse, but it really is a wonderful way to design and residentialize a non-residential use to soften it in its place, in its context, and in its time. I think it's sensitive, it's appropriate. There's more than enough, in my opinion. I think all of you agree to substantiate the geotechnical and hydrotechnical connections to this site, in that there are no other better ways to do this or site this building without offending in an untenable way the conservation interests of our city and our zone and our obviously our ecology and the resources there. So this is a soft impact. I like seeing this. It's not often we see this, so we should really carefully look at these as you guys all have. And I don't want to sound gushing about it, but it's just nice to see a board function when we all sort of have that thoughtful approach. We're not so tethered to the stricture of the code, because somehow we. So I too can support it for those reasons. I think it's a wonderful run at this. So good luck to you guys. If in fact you find that the board approves it. But I have nothing further, and if there aren't any other deliberations, anyone else wish to say anything further?
Is something that we would condition approval on agreement with the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, we can, and that's certainly within our power to do so. To whomever among you makes that motion, just add that to the motion. So I will invite a motion to approve.
Make the motion to approve. I move that we approve the variance application 21 Hale Street, which is number 22-5. Subject to the condition that they follow through with the proposed gift to the Conservation Commission of the land shown on the plan.
All right, motion has been made by Mr. Swanton. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Bennett. Motion made and seconded on the application to approve, the motion to approve the variance. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, moving now to our third matter of public hearing. We have the application of Flavio Lindenfeld and Cornelia Urban, the property address 11 Purchase Street. This is a special permit for non-conformities. The applicant seeks all necessary permits and approvals to. All right. We.
How do you like us to sit? Presenters and
Welcome. Actually, if we can have presenters on this side, to my left, and this way you can see forward, and this way you can make.
Claudio and then.
I'm gonna continue on Zoom. Okay, I didn't realize I was thinking so.
No worries.
I feel disruptive, so.
I want you to feel well, so,
Thank you.
do you want us, you'll be, we're still recording you
Yeah.
en route?
I'm putting my audio on.
Okay. Great. And for the record, our keeper of the records, Ms. Gretchen Joy, is going to be departing the live meeting, continuing to monitor and report on Zoom. And we'll continue keeping the minutes and the record, from home. She is, just not feeling 100%. So, with that, I will just read the public notice, and we'll undertake our third application this evening. And welcome to all of those that have entered the room to the zoning board of appeals for October 11th, 2022. The application before us is Claudio Linenfeld and Cornelia Urban, the property address 11 Purchase Street. This is an application for a special permit for nonconformity docket 2226. The applicant seeks all necessary permits approvals for the intensification modification within a side yard setback and an addition greater than 500 square feet. Ladies and gentlemen, before you had entered the room this evening, I'll just repeat this. We had designated our 5 voting members as myself, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Shannon, and Mr. Delisle. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Delisle is recusing himself. So in lieu of Mr. Delisle, we had appointed Ms. Patricia Pecknick to vote, one of our alternates, along with Lynn Scow, our other alternates. But we had originally designated that. Was there, if you wanted to switch that, or I'll let you.
It's Lynn's turn and
Yeah, we had done that. Lynn had just walked in a few moments after we made that decision. So we will, for purposes of this application, render our 5 voting members to include Ms. Scow. And so our 5 voting members are myself, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Shannon, and Ms. Scow. So without further ado, we have the application of 11 Purchase Street. May we hear from the council?
Sure, thank you. Jeff Roloff, counsel for the applicants, Claudio Lilienfeld and Nina Urban, who are behind me here this evening, in case questions come up that they need to answer. Also with me are Matt Langus with Scott Brown Architects and Blake Wilcox, the Joppa Group, who's managing the construction activities. As you noted at the outset, sorry, next slide, Caitlin, please. We are looking for 2 special permits for nonconformities, one related to some work that's being proposed on the structure within the side yard, the left side yard setback. And then also in addition to the rear of the house, exceeding the 500 square foot threshold. Next slide, please. Just to get you oriented to the context and the neighborhood. So in yellow is the 11 Purchase Street property. I'll just point out while we have this slide available that the structure at issue here is smaller than many of the adjoining properties, which I think you can tell visually from the aerial here, combined with the fact that the property is actually larger and the open space associated with the property is larger than most of the abutting properties. Next slide, please. I won't go through this in detail, but just to highlight a few things. The structure is a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming structure due to the fact that the building is in the left yard setback area, the front yard setback. The lot area is insufficient as compared to the zoning requirements, and the frontage is insufficient. The proposed project, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt to go through the architectural changes. Those are at the core of the applications and what we're proposing. But generally speaking, the project involves converting this structure from a 2-family to a 1-family. The addition of a 2-story addition on the rear of the building in place of an existing porch with a 2nd-story room above it. It's going to be a larger footprint than what's there, a 19 by 19 foot addition.
There's a new covered portico on the right side elevation and 3 new shed dormers that are each compliant with the dormer requirements of the ordinance. The project will involve replacing the front sidewalk with the brick sidewalk. The gravel driveway that exists currently will be replaced with permeable pavers. The plot plan, which you'll see in a bit, does include details that are more peripheral to the issues and applications before you, but they include fencing as well as a deck off the proposed addition. We included those details primarily to be sort of transparent and forthcoming with the neighbors. We have circulated these plans to the immediate neighbors. And we wanted to, Claudio and Nina wanted to preserve the ability to put these fences in the event that's what they decide to do. But I did want to mention this, that they may not be putting all the fences in that are shown on the plan. They're actually in discussions with 2 or 3 of the neighbors about replacing existing fences, sharing fences to the rear of the property, potentially not even putting a new fence in, but instead installing a vegetative screen. But we have kept these details on these plans because they want to preserve the right to do that down the road and wanted to be transparent about it. Caitlin, next slide, please. So with this, I'll turn it over to Matt to go through the architectural changes.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Langer, Scott Architects. So our approach here is to keep the main box, a traditional style, but to also add the last, the addition off the rear to do it in a way that is a little bit of a different design aesthetic direction, but complementary to the main house. So if you're looking at the front elevation, a lot of what we've done is keep the windows and doors in the same location for, to keep them in the same location, basically not only help us with DCOD, but it helps with that traditional feel of the house. So doing that in addition to staying sensitive on where and why we're adding new windows, like there's a box bay, for instance, on the right elevation that you'll see in the next slide, but that helps us keep the main box in the traditional style, but also helps us, keep that DCOD calculation down, which is always a challenge. So the front elevation, the entry windows and doors are all the same. We added dormers at the roof level, but they're a bit deceptive. The left dormer is actually 3.5 feet back from the main face of the house. The one on the right is about 8'2", which you'll see on the right elevation. The real elevation shows the 19 by 19 addition, which again, I said that we've taken a little bit of a different design aesthetic, but we're holding the roof line low, where we're keeping the profile, a little bit lower than the existing house. The height of that is closer to maybe 22'6" versus 28'1", so it's about a 6-foot difference between the two. Caitlin, if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the right elevation where the driveway side is. And here we're adding a traditional portico, same entry location. Most of the windows are in their same exact location. Obviously it's challenging working with DCOD, but the goal here is to keep a lot of that in its same location as best as possible, and to really think through why we're moving a window, why we're adding a window. So in addition to stepping that addition back, we're also holding it down to keep the magnitude of that addition a lot lower. Next slide, please. So the left side shows, a little bit better detail with where the deck is going to go. It's about 16 by 19. This also shows the metal railing that has basement access. It's an open staircase, so it's sort of tied a little bit into where we're having some metal elements on the back elevation, but doing it in a way that's a subtle sort of repetition of some materials that are around the corner. And that's all I have for my presentation. So unless there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address. I'd turn it back over to our technical office.
I just want to quickly remind the board of the standards. So these special permits to extend or alter a pre-existing non-conforming single or 2-family structure may be issued based on 2 findings. 1, that there will be no addition of a new nonconformity, and 2, that the proposed change will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the pre-existing nonconforming structure. Here, the project does not involve the addition of a new nonconformity. It's a project that's been thoughtfully designed such that it will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the pre-existing nonconforming structure. We actually believe the project will improve the aesthetics of the existing structure and will result in an overall benefit to the neighborhood. The intensity of use will be decreased from a two-family to a single family. There's no proposed increase in height of the structure. It's actually a relatively low structure compared to adjacent properties. The height of the existing structure is 23.9 feet, where the bylaw or where the zoning ordinance allows a 35-foot height. The work within the side yard setback will not be any closer to the property line than the existing structure. The project involves what we think is a minor expansion of the overall footprint of the building. The expansion is within the rear yard of the property, which is larger and will remain larger than the immediately surrounding yards. The project preserves more open space on this lot than required, preserving 60% of the lot versus the required 40%. We think the project will result in an improvement to the aesthetics of the structure and are in keeping with the character of the neighborhood in Newburyport more generally. With that, I'll turn it back to the board. Thank you.
All right, thank you for any roll-ups. Having heard the completion of the presentation, we'll close the presentation portion of tonight's public hearing on this address, and we will go to public comment. With public comment, and for ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that were outside when we sort of walked through what the flow of the process. If you're not familiar, we have the card up on the screen, and our attendees logging on via Zoom are seeing this as well. We'll just ask anyone who wishes to be heard. We start with the priority of those in the room physically, and then anyone online that wishes to be heard. And just, you needn't fall in any category of pro or con. Just simply raise your hand and you'll be recognized and share your thoughts. But do please give us your name and address. Okay, anyone in the room physically who wishes to be heard in connection with this application? Yes, ma'am. Oh, you can just simply stand where you are if you're comfortable. You're welcome to have a seat if you prefer. And if you can just, if I can ask you to give your name and address for our now offsite keeper of the records. And then we do ask everyone to kindly govern comments to about 2 minutes. We have wide latitude, so we don't often police that. But with that, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Bernier. I represent the abutters to the rear, number 18 Stanley Street. If you want to put up the image of the, I think it was like the second slide. I want to be clear that our comments today are about the project and not about the components. Overall, we do not support the project. Just put that right on out there. The project takes what is a 2,075 square foot house and makes it into a 3,500 plus square foot house. From the front side, Purchase Street, you're not going to see a lot of difference. But from the back, it is going to be a massive addition into what is really a much smaller scale neighborhood from the rear abutters side. Our house's total gross living area is only 1,500 square feet. House next door to us is even a little bit less. I think theirs is like 1,300 or 1,400. So for the abutters, us, and the abutters abutter, it will be quite a massive intensification of the site. We have a number of concerns because not only is it the addition, but it's also the deck. And the deck is going to be another, 16 square feet off the back. And then after that, there's going to be a patio, which sort of brings us to the next line of concern, which is what are on the plans as 6-foot fences. 6-foot fences for us just box us in all over again. We do have a very small yard. The entire lot, our lot is only 3,200 square feet, period, end of story. And so it just has this encroachment feel to it because we believe it is just too large for the back structure. But as I say, next door, you've got the Doherty Mead House. That's really pretty overbuilt on its lot. And then of course you have the Dye's house next door. That's way overbuilt on its lot. So when the comment is made that it appears to be with the new addition and scale to the existing houses, it's not exactly true. We recently and replaced the back fence at our own expense because the previous owner had let the fence deteriorate. It's a 42-inch open slat fence. A 6-foot fence is going to provide further shadow impact for our gardens, in addition to giving us that walled-in tenement feeling, which is becoming, frankly, all too familiar in Newburyport. I know that the abutters have said that they're open to a vegetative screen, which is great, but when they reserve their right to construct a 6-foot fence at any time, it sort of undermines that position and thinking. The other concern that we have is that when you take into account the attic dormers on both sides and a second floor balcony, which is on the sketches on the addition, it kind of gives you the funny feeling that you get privacy on level 1 with a 6-foot fence, but you've kind of forgotten that the 3rd and 2nd floors now have direct sight lines into the neighbors abutting all the surrounding properties. They'll be looking in our backyard, they'll be looking into the neighbors' houses from those dormer windows and from the back balcony. So you get privacy on one level, but it kind of gets overlooked on the other levels. Finally, the project memo highlights the conversion from multifamily, which it is now, to single family. With the addition of the square footage, bringing this unit to 3,550 feet, that's going to be awfully tempting to make that a multifamily again someday. Probably not by these owners, but by subsequent owners. So what I respectfully ask the board is to outline for the abutters and communicate to us under what conditions can this property revert back to multifamily, bearing in mind that at least 2 abutting properties are existing multifamilies already. So I'm not sure that the conversion to single family is going to be all that lengthy in time. We just don't know. And the size of it, you can at least get to 1,750 unit condos out of that. So those are our concerns, and I really, again, want to stress our concern is with the project, not the proponents, and we appreciate you allowing us to speak.
Thank you, Council, and thank you for your thoughtful remarks. Was there something else?
No, I had to giggle because you said council. That's not the last thing I am.
Well,
I just ask one. Hey, would you just?
Point of my chair.
Point.
This is our structure right here. This is 1,500 square gross feet of living space, 750 on each level. Steady Etymology the whole house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
excellent, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in connection with this app? And thank you very much for the follow-up. Anyone else wish to speak in connection with this application? Yes, sir.
Everybody,
Good evening.
I'm Matt McCann, and I live at 20 Salem Street, so just to connect with here.
Yeah.
So we're in a little bit different situation. So I did speak to both Jeff and to Claudia earlier. I think I'll just say generally speaking, we definitely agree with the statement that I think architecturally will improve the house. And that being single family is definitely preferable to us. The fact that it's extending further than we prefer, we're not as thrilled about that, but I think we accept that trade-off. Our big concern that I expressed both to Claudia and to Jeff was the fence. So we're a little bit different. We don't have a 4-foot fence. We have a current 6-foot fence that I believe are the person we bought from had actually attached that fence to an existing chain link fence, in which I understand that Claudia and Nina would like to take that down, which does make sense, but if you can take it down, it's probably going to compromise the fence. So I think we discussed potentially agreeing on a new 6-foot fence. And I think the one sticking point we had, which I did express, was that the revised plan actually has the fence continuing along our shed to the point where it might actually come right up against it. You couldn't do repairs in the back. But I think you talking to Claudia, I think they're open to
vegetative, and I just want to make sure I express that we wouldn't want to be in a situation we could not make repairs to the back of the shed. I believe we can agree on, vegetation and things like that. So I think, we're in a different situation. We would prefer it to be smaller, but it's a trade-off. And I think it does improve what the property looks like. So I think the fence is our biggest focus, and I think we've expressed where, we're on that. So I just wanted to go on record about that.
All right, thank you, Mr. McCann. Anyone else wish to speak in connection with the application? For, against, or just simply their thoughts? All right, I will now go to those online, having seen no hands here in the room, and of course, if someone comes up with any further questions here in the room, we'll certainly give you the floor again. Anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to be heard, just kindly raise your hand by clicking the hand raise button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will recognize you. We see that there's one dial-in caller. We'll recognize that caller, if that individual wishes to be heard by the last 3 digits of the number. Seeing no hands, going once, going twice. Anything further in the room before we move along? Ma'am, may I ask, I apologize, I didn't catch your name from my own notes. May I ask you?
Margaret Bernier.
Bernier, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing no further interest on speaking, we will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and go into questions from the board. And we'll begin with Mr. Shannon, to my left.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Swanton, to my left. I don't need to see the name tag. I now refuse to see the name.
I turned mine so you can see my name.
We're not used to being in this room. My apologies. We somehow hardwired ourselves to where people sit. But we should be able to read, words in English. That's mostly on me.
My first question is, has to do, both of your butters, talk about fences. And your plan has some things on it, your site plan does. Although somebody mentioned the fence line, the shed at number 20, and that's not shown in the site plan. I'm confused. So basically, how would you answer the questions that came up with the 2 abutters with respect to fences? What's your plan for fences? What do you do?
So I'll respond in 2 ways to that. First of all, I think that the topic of fences is here in front of us only because we put them on the plot plan. I don't think they're actually relevant to the applications that are pending. The applications that are pending are seeking approval to change the non-conforming structure. That's the residence itself. We included the fencing on this to be forthcoming and transparent with the neighbors because we knew we were going to be circulating these plans to them. And what we didn't want to do is go ahead with the project approved by the ZBA, go ahead with the building changes that were presented here, and then put fences in and have the neighbors be surprised. So we internally decided to put the fencing details on the plan, the deck on the plan. You'll notice also we're proposing to get rid of the existing shed and build a smaller one as close to the corner of the property as we can, 6 feet off of the rear and the sidelines. So the first answer is we don't think the fencing is actually relevant to these applications. It's not important. Even if you deny these applications, these owners can go in and install these fences tomorrow. All right, but substantively, we have been in discussions with the 2 neighbors you heard from. Those are ongoing discussions. We've committed to talking to Margaret, the abutter to the rear there, about an alternative to a 6-foot fence. For example, is there Claudio and Nina are looking for privacy in their yard and the ability to keep a dog contained. Can we accomplish that, or can they accomplish that with a vegetative screen combined with that 4-foot rail fence that's there? Or is there something else that can be done to accomplish those objectives without putting in a 6-foot fence, to which Margaret objects? That's a discussion that they've committed to having, and it's a detail it's open, something that doesn't have to be finalized as part of this process. With respect to Matt McCann, the other neighbor on the corner, we had very productive discussions this morning about just removing the fence that's there, replacing it in a combined coordinated effort with one fence that both parties are happy with. maintaining enough space behind the shed so that they can get to it to maintain it, either by using plantings to screen that area or just offsetting the fence far enough so that they can get in there. So these are ongoing conversations. We're pretty confident we're going to be able to work through these, but they're peripheral to the applications that are before this board. We don't want to hold up this process to resolve those conversations, and we'd like to keep these details on the plans that we have in front of you, just so that the right to install them is acknowledged going forward, whether or not they do it.
I'm gonna take just a kind of a point of personal preference as chair, and Attorney Roloff's with respect, because I've known you for a long time. I think this board would likely, though I won't speak with them, share my sentiment, which I'll share with you, that I think all of this is a sort of a totality of presentation, the fencing, the impact. I think it's probably, and I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves, but I think that it is in the interest of this board and certainly in the interest of a better result to address even the sort of more granular details, the finer strokes, because they impact that which is within our purview, and the fencing and the massing and the scale and those sorts of things certainly aren't outside of our purview. Though many might say they're not primary, but they're certainly not outside entirely. So I wouldn't want you to go too far down that road, because I know that I would find it difficult to reconcile if there was sort of a proponent harder in line that, you know, the fencing conversation, this sort of other aesthetic is something that should be dealt with on another day. I don't know that that is something I agree with. So I think it's fair to just tell you that out of the gate and let the rest of the board members speak to that if they wish along the way. So with that, Mr. Bennett.
Well, wait, I have some other questions.
Yes, oh, sorry. I didn't do that short, sorry.
Sorry. Another topic that came up from a butter was the scale of this thing, and I know massing is another thing we think about. The current assessor's report that came in with this application shows the building has 2,075 square feet of living area. How much square feet of living area is there with your proposal?
I can answer that. Scott, I'm also an architect for the project. So, although the math is a little fuzzy when it comes to square footage of this house, that assessor's data card does not include the full square footage of the existing attic. Half of it is sort of finished, but is not included in that square footage. It also doesn't include the existing enclosed screen porch that we're removing from the back of the house. So I actually think that number is a little higher than what's shown on that data card. But by my rough calculations, again, the math is a little fuzzy because when it comes to calculating the square footage at the attic level, you have to make a judgment in terms of where you calculate that. But I think roughly we're looking at about 700 square feet at finished space at the attic compared to what I think is currently about 400 square feet. So I think in totality, this new renovation, I think we're looking at around 3,300 square feet plus or minus, as opposed to what's there now, which I think is around 20. So it's roughly increased about 1,000 square feet.
Another question that came up from the abutters was about, part of the attraction to some of the neighborhood is going to a single family here. Would you be open to conditions that's part of the deal?
Well, I don't want to give legal advice to the abutters, but I'm pretty certain that under the zoning ordinance, if somebody in the future wanted to convert this single family house to a 2-family house within this R2 zone, they'd have to come to the ZBA for a special permit. Yes. So I don't think a condition is warranted. And can I just respond really quickly to the fence, just a point of fact on the fence topic?
Oh, cool.
So just, we don't have photos of the backyard. I wish I had some in our slides, but Claudio reminds me to inform you that currently there are essentially fences around this entire parcel. 6-foot fences from on the left side all the way down the property line. On the back, there is not a 6-foot fence, and this is the line that Margaret was speaking to. She has a lower slatted fence that you can see through, so totally different on the back. But then on the right side, again, 6-foot fence. So it's not a significant change to come in here and put a new 6-foot fence. So even if that's a detail that you see as significant, I don't think the fencing that's proposed and shown on this plot plan would prevent you from making the findings you need to support these special permits.
I don't disagree. My comment is simply raising the issue of not segregating out the notion of fencing as a subject matter from the conversation this evening, not so much what that fencing looks like, if at all, what size it is, if any, but.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think, but yeah, and fairly put and point to the table, so I appreciate that. And to follow up just on the question of the single versus two-family, Mr. Swan, I do agree with Attorney Roloffs. It is in fact something that this goes to a question that I believe Ms. Bernier had raised as well. If there were a movement in the future, some undefined point in the future, sooner or later, different ownership or what have you, at least under the current paradigm of our zoning, it would have, and presumably any evolution of that, it would have to come back before whomever sits in our chairs, if not us, for review as though we're brand new. So there's almost an embedded safety net, condition by virtue of just the zoning itself, which may or may not be of some comfort to those who have raised it.
Thank you for that. I have one other question, which is, you mentioned in the presentation that your dormer is 3.5 feet setback from the building. Were you referring to the dormer on the left or the dormer on the right?
So both dormers on the left side, the dormer on the left side from the front is 3.5. That's set back 1.5 feet on the left side. But the dormer on the right is 8'2" from the front.
Okay.
So it's the two left dormers.
There's about another over 7 feet from the building to the street, so that dormer is about 10 feet back. One of the things we sometimes focus on is rubber extension near the street, so that's a good 10 feet back and way up in the air. Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Mr. Bennett.
Just have one, can you describe what's going on and what the space is being used for? In the proposed addition?
So on the first floor, the proposed addition is an extension of the living space. And on the second floor is a combination of storage, bathroom, and a master suite.
Can we ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Well, we've closed questions, but I'll certainly, it's just us. So in the spirit of having a better result, we want to hear from everyone. So
Well, quickly, will any living space be added in the basement areas at all?
okay, thank you. And what you may find, and Ms. Bernier, and this goes to Mr. McCann as well, or anyone else that may speak. When questions are posed to the board, forgive us the appearance of discourtesy and not responding directly. It's just more the format. You may well find, if not, we'll surely find your question redacted by a member of the board and posed in that manner. So rest assured, we hear it and we will take it in, even if it comes off as dismissive. It's not intended that way. It's merely the procedural, rigor of this process for what it's worth. But I've heard that question and certainly appreciate it. So with that, I believe we're at Mr. Shannon.
Will there be any living space in the basement?
So, that part of the reason why we're proposing that staircase on the back is for, any sort of potential use down there. We haven't really spent significant time working up the basement, so as of right now, there is no finished space, but the goal is to have some sort of finished space down there. Yes, that's the primary reason for adding the staircase in the back.
Okay. Thank you. Going to the zoning matrix, I can't make heads or tails how you got from the existing lot coverage is 22.2% and the proposed is 25, which is a 2.8% increase. And this building is, it's a good size. It's 360 square feet on the ground, which is about 6% of the lot. How did the math come out? I know you're dumping a porch, but the porch is pretty small compared to the building. Can you go over how you got from 22.2 to 25? With a 360 square foot footprint?
I don't have the exact math from Chuck's calculations, but I think the net difference between removing the existing shed that's there and making it smaller, in addition to removing the two-story addition that's there now, netted that percentage to be that 2.8.
Okay, because you are replacing the shed, it's just a smaller
It's a
shed.
smaller shed, correct?
I mean, it's really almost insignificant. So you don't have the math, we just
I don't have the math.
want to be trustworthy.
Anything further?
No, that's all, no other questions.
Ms. Scott?
I have a question, just a clarification. I saw on the plans that the current home has a chimney or two chimneys, and there's none drawn on the plans. Is that's correct?
Correct.
Anything? Okay, Mr. Luan. Sorry, I apologize. You confused, respect.
I don't have questions. Nothing to say.
All right. I don't have any further questions either that haven't already been asked and addressed. So we will, unless there's any further questions from the ZBA, yes, yeah.
Just one more point, because I'm not sure if this letter came to the board, it was addressed to the board, so. The reason I'm sitting here is because Lisa Mead is one of the abutters to this property. She and her partner did submit a letter. I thought it went to the ZBA, maybe she just sent it to me, expressing no opposition to the project, so I just wanted that to be noted on the record.
Great. Thank you, Attorney Roloffs. Did everyone receive that letter? Did anyone receive that letter?
No, I don't think it was like 3 members.
Okay. Okay, so we can accept it as represented that there is support by the abutters. So
That one abutter, yes.
okay, we'll close that portion of the public hearing and we can go into deliberations now. And Mr. Swanton will lead us off with deliberations around the criteria for the special permit.
Yeah, well, first criteria is, are there any new nonconformities? And I don't see any, so it's that. Next basic criteria is it worse than what's there, so there's more elegant way of saying that. You know, from my perspective, this addition is on the back. It is setting on both sides. It is low from the top. Does make the place bigger, but there is quite a bit of land in this lot, so it doesn't exceed its lot coverage ratios. Assuming the math is all right there. I have some concerns about the fence, but I'm hoping one of my colleagues can figure out a better way to address that as we go around the table. But I can support this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Mr. Bennett.
I'm in the same category. My support is somewhat reluctant. I think this is quite a large addition, and it pushes the envelope for me. I look around the neighborhood and I see it's somewhat of a hodgepodge of sizes, and I take Ms. Baronet's comments. She's right next door. However, there are other rather large structures right around the applicant's house here. So that being said, I think I don't think I should be guided by one, but have to look at this neighborhood in its totality. And it seems to me that the addition, although large, is not substantially detrimental. I just kind of my own bias here. I hate to see actually the two family home go into a single family. Housing stock here, we need more housing stock. That's not for me to solve, so, but it's just fine. I can support this. As it's.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Chen.
Yeah, I guess my problem was always massing the size, which I think one of the abutters brought up. The addition is, in round numbers, twice the size of the existing porch that sticks off the back. I think the new addition is 19 feet and the porch is somewhere around 10, could be 11. Hard to scale it. So it is quite a bit bigger. And I think like my colleagues have brought that up, that massing, we do take that into account. However, with that said, I think we've had other projects similar to this come before us that we've found that this scale is acceptable. So I'd have to say, in keeping with what we've done in the past, and the fact that it's large, not huge, I would find it acceptable. And again, there are no new nonconformities. I feel that the size is not more detrimental to the neighborhood. I would like to find a way that the board can get the fencing issue resolved for our neighbors. I think fencing is important. If you want a fence, I think there should be a fence. If you don't want a fence, there should be a way to not have a fence. I like the idea of the screening, arborvitae's or whatever, some type of vegetative screening where a fence might hit someone's property or hit a building. I don't know if we can put that in the finding, but if there's a way we can craft that, I guess I would be supportive of that as well.
Well, I mean, we can invite, Mr. Chairman, we can circle back to the applicant through attorney roll-offs and invite any input or thoughts on it and see if that advances the refinement of something in the way of a solution, if there is one. But I think we can do that as we round the table. I'll likely come back. Attorney roll-offs will likely circle back to you and your clients to see if there's thoughts that could.
I know attorneys love the term mutually agreeable.
Yeah, and not always so. Some things aren't always mutually agreeable, but we will aspire to the best version of that, of course, from the time we have. But if there wasn't anything further, Mr. Chairman, we'll Ms. Gow, you have any you can jump into deliberations.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything new to add, other than it does seem like a big expansion of the property into the lot. And I keep looking at the open space and saying, is that really what it's left with? But looking at the pictures, it has more open space than most of the neighbors. So I don't think it's more detrimental to the neighborhood than what does exist. So.
Mr. Watt.
I am recused.
We're just gonna keep calling on you until something changes. No, I'm kidding.
Keep me awake.
You're even gonna vote.
We're keeping you up to show. Just a second.
I'm not voting, so my comments can be taken with a grain of salt, but it will be a bit salty, I'm afraid. I do agree with Ms. Bernie that neighboring houses were overbuilt on their lot prior to our current zoning law. I do think that from Purchase Street, you are gonna see the dormers, and I find them unsympathetic. We're already adding 722 square feet, and I'm imagining finishing the basement. I do have Allen massing concerns as well. And the fenestration is rather jarring and not coherent. I'm sorry to see the chimneys go, and I'm sympathetic to the objection to the deck. So for me, at the end of the equation, it is substantially more detrimental. However, I'm not voting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bexing. I'm kind of torn in this as well. I'm definitely moved by, and I think it's no secret. I mean, I'm moved by the de-intensification of two-family to single family. I think that in this zoning district, notwithstanding the laudable comments and very appropriate comments of Mr. Bennett with respect to housing stock and the loss of multi-families, I think that we also have to run that through the lens of the place and space, and these are tight quarters, to say the least. So the-intensification in already tight quarters of the use is, I think, favorable and is a positive redaption and adaption of this property, and I do think it is a large lot. I think it's also true that it's Purchase Street exposure, it leaves little to the, the passerby as to what the impact really is, but the side view and the view from, the other three sides, will show more of the massing. All of that said, while it is, I can see how it could be more detrimental, or perhaps at least even cool, as they say. I don't think it's I don't think it rises to the criteria of substantially more detrimental based on the cases we've seen along the way. Myself personally, the word substantial in the criteria as we apply it is just that. In my mind, it's an above and beyond measure of impact, of detriment. And while fair minds might differ on detriment, I think that there would be substantially more detrimental. For me, it would have to be a lot more intrusive. I can support it, though I share my colleagues' thoughts with the whether there's any value in trying to soften the immediate abutter impact with potentially vegetative screen in lieu of what admittedly already exists in the form of 6-foot fencing, proposed to be replaced with more 6-foot fencing. And so I'll put that out to you and your clients, Attorney Roloffs, to the extent you wish to address it, and that's entirely up to you. This isn't a vegetative screen shakedown. It's just, it's been said, it's been heard. We need to sort of, place it on the table and see if there's a there, and then move along. But I can support this, though. That's, in all fairness, that's, I would like to see, if I'm to support it, I certainly would like to see that kind of accommodation to balance the equities in the neighborhood. But I won't say anything further. Was there any other deliberations that any member wishes to add before we close? So we can close deliberations, but I just as promised, I'll invite Attorney Roloffs, I'll invite your thoughts, your client's thoughts, or a pause if you wish to chat for a moment. We're not going to hurry you into a vote without giving you the opportunity to see if you wish to address anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Let me suggest this as a solution to that. So we're talking about two property lines here, those of the neighbors who spoke this evening. I don't think it would be appropriate to give either of them a veto power on the fence that's shown on the plan, but my clients have told them and remain willing to talk to them about alternatives to the fencing, and sometimes to put some teeth on something like that is to just acknowledge that commitment in a condition. So one thing you could consider is imposing a condition that requires the applicants to continue their discussions with those two neighbors, 18 Salem and 20 Salem, with respect to alternatives or different configurations of the proposed fencing. If based on those discussions, the plan changes, to just as a matter of fact, report those changes back to the zoning board for its files, so it's clear what was accomplished or what wasn't accomplished. It may be that they end up with the same configuration you're looking at now, and I don't think that should defeat the applications, but it also might, having that commitment to report back to the board will put enough behind the discussions for them to be meaningful. So I would suggest that.
Okay. Any member of the CBA have any further thoughts or any other additional comments? All right, hearing none. And thank you, Attorney Roloffs, and your applicants, your clients as well. Folks, thank you for entertaining that additional conversation, whatever that may come to. Do we have a motion to approve? And if so, is there?
I would just add, if the board does want to go that way, that you report to the zoning administrator, perhaps prior to building.
Okay. Thank you. All right, members of the ZBA, so we've heard from Ms. Sullivan as well with respect to any such condition along those lines, the framing that should be in the form of reporting to the zoning administrator before the issuance of building permit. With that, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve, Claudia Lilienfeld and Cornelia Urban, 11 Purchase Street, ZNC 22-26. With provision that the discussion on fencing and coming up with a solution for the neighbors. Be reported to the zoning administrator prior to the issuance of a building permit.
And that's just report the result of that effort, not report a definitive result. A definitive one way or the other, but simply that request that it be readdressed and examined further, be undertaken. Okay,
Second.
all right.
Swanton.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Shannon with the condition and seconded by Mr. Swanton calling the roll, which will exclude Mr. Delisle, I promise. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
And Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That is 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries. And good luck to you. And thank you for your indulgence. And folks, Mr. Bernier and Mr. McCann, thank you for your time and courtesy of your thoughts. It's very important in this process that we endeavor to be as perfect in the imperfection of this business. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. Thank you all for your service to the city too. Been there, done that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks, for coming in this evening. All right, moving to, well, we'll give a moment for a champagne. Going for a line change. Turn the cameras off. And they don't open any further. So they go and get sweeter. This one, I don't have. Somebody's still the plan. Oh, don't remind. Yeah, I'm gonna keep her. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I know that you've been sitting patiently outside. Allow me, since you've been sort of out of earshot and out of eye shot, I want to thank you for your patience. I'll introduce myself. I'm Ralph Champetti. I'm the chair. We are pleased to have you here this evening, and we will get into the business of your application. And I see Attorney Tucker.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. So this is the application of Lobarbo Property Management LLC, 2 White's Court. There are 2 matters before us. A variance request, docket 22-6, to modify an existing variance for a side and rear yard setback of a lot coverage for proposed 2-family, and also a special permit. The special permit is docket 22-6, and it seeks all necessary approvals to modify the existing special permit so as to reduce the 3-family residential use to a 2-family residential use. And with that, may we hear from the applicant, Attorney Tucker?
Please. Chair and members of the board, my name is Michael Tucker and I practice law in Peabody, Massachusetts. And I represent Lobarbo Property Management, which owns 2 White's Court and some other properties in Newburyport. Frank Lobarbo has been a member of the community for quite a long time. And 2 White's Court is a location at which his daughter, his son-in-law, and his 2 grandchildren live. The purpose of the project is to increase the living space for that young family as their children grow. They won't be able to stay in the neighborhood that they're in now unless they can make some extra space. They've got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, both daughters, and that's the reason for the project. As the chair said, it's 2 applications for a single project. One in the nature of a modification of a variance that was granted in 1995, and one a special permit for use and for relief as to dimension. I should start by saying that the project does not does not add any nonconformities, which when you look at the property is a remarkable statement to be able to make. It's a very unusually shaped lot. It's very difficult to place a building on the lot, but they've done so, and the building that's there is the building that is essentially going to stay. In 1995, they requested and received relief from this board, both a special permit and a variance that allowed them to change in the WMD district property that was being used for, at the time it was called industrial. It was a furniture making shop. Although it was only intermittently, I think, used for that purpose in 1995. And there was a residential unit there as well. So it was mixed in the WMD. The board permitted the change of use to a 3-family residential building. And that's the status that it has today. We had a couple of challenges before we were able to bring a project to the board. We found that there was an encroachment that hadn't been previously found on surveys that had to be resolved. And in our memorandum, you can see that we have set an easement aside to resolve that encroachment for all the title holders going forward. We also had to record the 1995 relief. That hadn't been done. It's been done now. So with respect to the project, if you can get the next slide. The 2 Whites Court is essentially a U-shaped parcel, and the 2 ends of the U are the frontage. And because of a peculiarity in the zoning bylaw in the city of Newburyport, we're allowed to use, as I read the bylaw, 1 side of the U. We can take the larger of the 2 sides of the U as our frontage. That gives us 21 feet of frontage. So we're non-conforming in lot area. There's about 6,300 feet in frontage. The front side and rear setbacks, because of the unusual configuration of the lot, are non-conforming. Lot coverage is non-conforming, and open space on the lot is non-conforming. So that's the circumstance that we find ourselves in today. With respect to all of those non-conformities, only one is going to change. Lot coverage is going to change by 1% under the project that we propose. It's going to go from 47 to 48%. Beyond that, all the non-conformities are going to stay the same. There will be 2 dimensional changes. We have requested relief in 3 areas of the project. If you can go to slide 3. That's our lot. You can see the 2 sides of the U, and the 21-foot frontage is on the lower side of the U as it's depicted on that slide. We're going to put a small portico on the north side of the building, just above what will be the entryway to the 2 units. That is not enclosed. It's not a mudroom of any type. It's a shed roof with 2 pillars that hold it up by the step, the entryway. And it's that area which doesn't add to the footprint of the building technically, because it's not a part of the building technically, but it does add that 1% of the lot coverage. It's essentially a rounding error that you see there. Then on the east side of the building, there's a deck that's being built, that's proposed to be built along the east side, but on the 2nd floor only. There'll be space underneath that deck, but for the stairway to provide access and egress. Then the other change that is proposed in the project is an increase in the height from 20 feet at the mean to 25 feet at the mean, which is permitted under the bylaw in the WMD district. So 25 feet is not non-conforming. It conforms in the WMD. If we take a look at the various sections of the requested relief, perhaps slide number 6. That is the current state of the north side of the building and the proposed north side of the building after the project. The portico is what you see in the lower right-hand corner of the drawing. And you can see the construction of the east deck along what would be the river side of White's Court. The height is improved, the dormers are removed. And the new mean height, as I say, is 25 feet, which fits within the WMD district. Slide number 7. Slide 7 shows the property and the roof line, which is changing.
That's significant because 2 White's Court is also in the DCOD. It doesn't affect us as a matter of permitting, I don't believe, in that the building was built in 1970. It is identified as an intrusion on the district data sheets. And perhaps you could tell by looking at it that it doesn't have any particular historical significance, either by its construction or architecture, or its contact with any particular historical event or individual. So the DCOD, while it's technically a demolition to change the roof line, our roof line will change without impacting the DCOD. Slide number 8, please. And this is the east side of the building as it currently is on the left and as it's proposed on the right. You can see that we've gone to a great deal of trouble to try to beautify the building and make it more pleasant for what is a very tight neighborhood. By making these changes, we're able to reduce the number of units, give Mr. LaBarba and his son and daughter-in-law and their grandchildren the space that they need to park 4 cars on the lot, which for 2 residential units is appropriate. I think it's fair to say to beautify the building for the purpose of the neighbors and the neighborhood. The board has received, I think, a number of letters in support of the project from the abutters and people who are a little more far-flung than the abutters are, indicating that the project would be appropriate, that it would be attractive, and that they were familiar with Mr. Birnbaum and his family, with Mr. LaBarba and his family, and they thought that it was an appropriate thing to do to try to keep them in the neighborhood. Again, the effect of the relief would be not to create any new nonconformities. There would be a 1% increase in the lot coverage due only to that small shed-covered portico. There'd be a reduction in use from 3 units to 2, and therefore a concomitant reduction in parking and density. Mr. Birnbaum and his family would have enough room then to continue to raise their daughters in the neighborhood in which they were born. I think you have the letters of support before you. I won't go into any further detail unless the board requires it.
All right, thank you, Attorney Tucker. With that presentation complete, we'll close the presentation portion of the hearing, and we'll go to public comment. And as you can see, there's the card up, and that is mostly for folks online, but not exclusively. So we will see if there's anyone in the room who wishes to speak in connection with the application first, then we'll go to our online participants, if there are any there, and there are. So in the room, does anyone wish to speak in connection with the application, for, against, or simply speak? You're welcome to have the floor and just give your name and address for our keeper of the record, who's taking notes remotely this evening. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Hi, Bill McDevitt with 1 Australia Way, we about the property. And we've seen the drawings and definitely add to the neighborhood. And see nothing wrong with that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak in connection with the application? Going once, going twice, and we'll go to our online attendees. Does anyone who is logged in online via Zoom wish to be heard? If so, please just click your raise hand icon and we'll recognize you and give you the floor. Seeing no hands, going once, going twice. Okay, we will close that portion, the public comment portion of the public hearing, and we'll go into questions from the board. We'll begin with Mr. Swanton.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, just Attorney Tucker, I know you're here for both a variance and a special permit. I'm just struggling. Maybe you can clarify why do you need a variance, or what is the variance from for? Just I don't.
The variance is for, it's a dimensional variance for the lot coverage issue.
Okay. So that's the 1%.
That's the 1%.
That's the variance request.
It is, it's essentially a modification of the variance that was granted in 95.
Okay, That, yes, okay, so it's modifying an existing variance. But we're here calling it a variance.
Understood.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. That's all.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
I've got all the questions. That was my question as well. Thank you. I can sit on the other side of you next time. I've got all the questions.
Ms. Scott.
I don't have any other questions.
Wow.
With regard to the variance, is it any consequence that the variance that was granted in 1995 was a use variance, not a dimensional variance?
Well, only in that the modification includes going from 3 to 2, which is something, which is a change in use. We've included that in our special permit
Right.
application. as well.
Yeah, I understand that part. I was just curious about the fact that the relief that is the variance was not. It was not it was not dimensional, but related to the use, and I didn't know if there was any particular importance to that distinction.
I wouldn't attach too much importance to it. I think that I could have perhaps written it the other way. Upon zoning review and a conversation with the office. They understood it that way,
Okay,
and I didn't have a problem understanding it that way.
okay, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Peckman.
Yes, and I appreciate that question. I'm just curious, where was the encroachment?
The encroachment is, if you have your backup slide 5. It's a more, thank you. It's not quite as distorted. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the site plan. There we go. If you'll notice in the east, on the east side of the lot, the garage runs across the line from 2 Whites Court to 8 Whites Court. And until this survey, that for whatever reason, no one picked up on it on the survey. So we drafted and recorded an easement to benefit 2 Whites Court and burden 8 Whites Court in perpetuity so that the building can remain and be repaired and so forth from the 8 Whites Court side without causing any more disturbance between possible landowners in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions that haven't already been addressed either. So unless there's any further questions by the board, we will close the questions from the board section of our public hearing and go into deliberations, beginning with Mr. Swanton. And just for purposes of efficiency, we can deliberate both the variance application criteria to the extent you wish to address that, as well as the special permit in in your deliberations. Just feel free to address them as you see fit, but if you could address them both in the first passing, that will allow us to get all of that information out on the table. Mr. Swanton.
Well, I think for this type of lot, going from 3 to 2 houses is a plus. There are no new nonconformities. The issue around the 1% additional coverage because of the portico, I mean, it's 2 columns and a roof. I mean, to me, that's, I don't know if that fits the definition of de minimis, but it is small. They're supportive of butters. I appreciate your pictures, how you showed a picture of the building and the plan next to it from different angles. I don't think the pictures of the building did it justice. I think it's actually in real life, it's even a little more challenging a building. So I think this is a big improvement for the neighborhood. So for all those reasons, I can support both sides of this request.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Mr. Beck.
Yeah, I echo Mr. Swanton's comments. It's certainly an aesthetic improvement. I would agree that reducing the number of units from 3 to 2 in this situation certainly makes some sense given the tight quarters there. The 1% increase is de minimis and hardly, if anything, de minimis. So for those reasons, I think it's an improvement to the neighborhood and support on the other side. Certainly.
Very good. Mr. Shannon.
Yes, I'll start by saying I can support the both applications, but I was excited to see that the hurdle for the variance is 4 bullets. And the hurdle for the special permit is 9. That's quite rare that we have an inverse of that. Usually the variance has a stronger burden of proof. But I went through the 9 for the for the special permit, and I have to agree with my colleagues that I think it does meet the hurdle, and I do think that the changes are small enough that we can find them acceptable, and they are more detrimental to the neighborhood. So I can support it.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Ms. Gill.
I also think the project looks like a big improvement to the neighborhood, and I did go through the bullets, and I agree that the 9 bullets for the special permit seem to meet them all. And looking at the variance, I guess my question is, it seems to require that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would involve a substantial hardship. If it weren't granted, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of what your view is of how it meets that criteria.
Well, I think the hardship that we've identified is that Mr. LaBarba and his son-in-law and daughter and family would have to leave. They have 2 small children now. Property's been acceptable to this point, but it's a 6-year-old girl and a 2-year-old girl. And I've had 2 girls myself. They're going to need some space. And it's just not available on a lot of this configuration and in a building of this construction.
Yeah, the lot is unique, sure. I guess my only concern with that is we hear a lot of cases here that talk about, people wanting to expand for family reasons, and I'd just be interested to hear from other board members as to whether or not that's generally considered a hardship. It doesn't usually come in that context, I guess, actually, but that was my question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gill. Mr. Lewin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think the special permit has been covered over pretty well. With respect to the variance, I think that we're looking to, as Attorney Tucker said, to modify the variance that exists. So I think we have the benefit of the findings that were made in 1995, where they hit these points pretty well, and they have a decision. And I don't think that there's anything different here today. So I can support both prongs of this application.
Thank you. And Ms. Beckman.
Yeah, thank you for that exchange. I agree with the gentleman from Pop Crowley Way. This is my neighborhood. I walk by there all the time. I think it's very, you go down that hill and it's tucked back in there. And I just over the summer, I was walking past there and I thought someone's gonna do something with that place because it's such a great location. So yeah, I would support it as well.
I would have to agree. I actually, I'm always told by those that grew up in Newburyport that I'm a newcomer, and once I've lived here 1,000 years, I'll still be a newcomer. But when I first moved to Newburyport in '95, I actually lived at 182 Merrimack Street, so right on Pop Crowley. In fact, I just missed the pleasure of ever having met the actual Pop Crowley, although I know people who have. I've shaken the hand of those who have shaken the hand of Pop Crowley, so. But I know this space. I've walked that road. I've walked up and down that area. In fact, I was on this board. I've been on this board since '02, and I recall when you were last before us, which seems like yesterday, yet it was many, many years ago, which I can't believe. But it's a pleasure to see you again. I'd like to see this this restorative reuse and thoughtful adaptive reuse of these, this part of the built environment in our city. It is nice to see folks sort of generationally plan for and make usable what has sort of fallen out of, I won't say relevance, but out of just its highest and best utility in our time. So it's nice to see people invest in those efforts. To have it stay in the family is important. And, as a sort of a member of this city, as an adopted family, it's nice to see that lineage and that legacy carried forward. So I commend you folks for that. And thank you for the thoughtful measure in trying to bring this to us. I certainly can support it. My colleagues have articulated the reasons why. But I just wanted to add that because I know this space. But was there anything further? And thank you for the indulgence, my colleagues, for letting me say that out loud. Anything further, any other deliberations before we close? All right, seeing no further deliberations, we'll close the deliberations and I will invite a motion to approve on both. We'll do the variance first and then we'll do separately a motion second and a vote on the special permit. So we have a motion on the variance.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance for the application for 2 Whites Court, variance 22-6.
Second, Ken Swanton.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Delisle and seconded by Mr. Swanton, calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Ms. Scout. Are you,
I'm not voting.
you're not voting on this. Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
And Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries.
I will vote yes.
And, thank you.
I'm just saying.
We're gonna throw in an extra vote. We have a motion to approve the special permit for non-conforming.
I'll make the motion again to approve the special permit for 2 Whites Court, CSP 22-6.
Second, Ken Swanton.
All right, motion is made again by Mr. Delisle and seconded by Mr. Swanton. Calling the roll on the motion to approve the special permit. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's also 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you, folks, very much.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board for your time.
Yep, we're gonna take a quick moment. I think, just to use the restroom break. This is the time. And, when you folks were last here, I think it was Joey Sullivan who represented you, and I remember this vividly.
Well, he was one of the supporters.
Oh, he was,
Mark Griffin.
Mark Griffin, and
Yeah,
Mark
yeah.
Griffin, thank you. Mark had described the pizza places, like he said, my clients run a nice little weekend business. And I said, I've never heard of weekend business, but boy, would I love that weekend business. I'll never forget that. I tease my wife all the time. Congratulations. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good piece of history.
Yeah, those are very lovely. Never practicing any longer now.
Watching him on the video.
Yeah, it is. It's
No, I didn't.
it's outrageous.
How's everything at Newburyport?
It's good. It's nice to see you.
Have a good night.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Moving kind of along.
Just wanted to make.
Why did you remember Joe Sullivan so physically?
He's just one of the guys that Joe is one of the early sort of like native guys I got to be pretty close with, like native reporters, Kevin Finnegan, Joe, a handful of those hooligans, but I just remember he used to talk about when he was a kid going down, that part of the.
Yeah. Joe's a very good guy. He's like my husband.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, the whole Sullivan, the Sullivan time, they were very gracious and very welcoming. My wife and my fiance and now wife, and I first moved to the Newburyport, they had a handful of others who just welcomed us right on. They had made it very, very easy to feel like a member of, it was hard to believe that we hadn't grown up. And so instantly, that's why I think that's what I thought of Joe. All right. Good evening, folks. Welcome. Let's see, we are finished with our public hearings. We're gonna go into the business meeting. And we have we have a few matters on our business meeting. The first of which is a request for a minor modification, 21 Walnut Street. And I believe we have the owners applicants here before us. And good evening, folks. You were outside. I'm Rob Champetti. I'm the chair. We have members of the ZBA we introduced earlier on, and we are all here to hear your request. And so thank you for your patience sitting outside. And with that, you have the floor, and you, if you would mind, just kindly give your name and address so we know it, just for, our keeper of the minutes. So
Yeah, you bet. This is Nora Dodge, Jeff Dodge. This is our renovated home on 21 Walnut Street. And I think there are two items on the docket, one of which is sidewalk repair.
There's three.
Three,
Yeah.
So we had a trellis,
trellis.
tree and.
Oh, the tree, right, I thought, okay. So, the sidewalk repair, I saw something that was written about that. And we're waiting for the public works to go and confirm we have a landscaper that's ready to do a patch to take care of the tripping hazard.
Just slow,
Pardon?
just slow.
Yeah, yeah, he scoped it out. We're just waiting for decisions on that, and as soon as we get approval, we'll make that fix and we'll be good to go. So that's the first one. Second one, the tree. I think that's up to you all in terms of, do you want to put a tree in this little spot that exists in front of the house? There's a tree there now. And then there's also a telephone pole. That if you put a tree in the middle, there's not a ton of space where you can actually make it work. So the question is, do you want to put a tree in that space? There again, I would argue it's a little crowded there.
I think they already determined.
Yeah. That's what I thought that was decided.
Well, I think you still have to vote on it, is that it?
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
That's what.
but it was.
I'm sorry, I was not here
You weren't.
last time around. And then the final one is the trellis. And our, we would like to not put the trellis there. I know it was part of the original design. We now have a tree that sort of occupies what is a, I guess you'd call it a void. And, if you want us to put the trellis there, we'll do it, but we would argue that, in looking at a lot of other Greek Bibles, I've seen that void in other places where the trellis doesn't exist and or a door. Or a tree, yeah. It would be very hard to, grow any kind of plantings up that trellis based on what happened from a landscape standpoint. There's a bunch there along the side of the house. You can see it's granite underneath pebble. So in terms of plantings, it would be a tough go. So it would be basically a trellis that would just, stand up against the hardy plant. And that was the purpose of putting a big tree there. We knew that there was going to be a void there. And so, yeah, shame on us for not coming forward to this committee ahead of time. I
just didn't know.
didn't know the rules and regulations, so that's my bad. But we would like to ask for approval to not move forward with that, but committee feels like we should, then so be it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dodge. And was there anything further that you wanted to add?
No, I think, we're here to do what we're supposed to do, so.
Great, well, I appreciate that. Okay, so members of the ZBA, we have before us during the business meeting a request for a minor modification. Our duties are to first determine on the record whether we feel it is in fact minor for this request, and if so, whether and it meets with our collective approval. So we'll go around the horn and start with Mr. Swanton on thoughts, and then we can establish whether we have thought it out enough to proceed with the vote, or whether we want to fine tune it further.
Yeah, from my perspective, and there's three parts here. The tree, I've been over there and eating pork and some pictures today, and I don't have a big problem not planting a tree there. There's already a telephone pole. There's already another tree very close to it. The sidewalk, there's a picture of the sidewalk, and I guess the proposal is to have your guys somehow smooth that out, and I'm fine with that. I'm not quite sure exactly what the wording is, although I think Andy sent us some proposed wordings.
Mhm.
So I think with that wording, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, to me, the trellis, I mean, this is. I remember this meeting like it was yesterday, and, you know, you guys had spent some time with the historic commission. Finally got their agreement to remove the door that's been there forever since the house was built, and replace that form with a trellis that was part of the compromise. We struggled with it here, we agreed to reinforce that compromise. To me, it's just. It's not good faith, I think, drop it out now, so I really have a problem with that, and I tell you, stuff grows, so if you can grow a tree there. You can grow the bulk, if you really wanted to grow something on the trellis, it's it's not a requirement that the trellis is something growing on it, but. You could always start at vine down where the tree is and have it crawl up the trellis, if you really wanted to. Stuff grows everywhere in this town, stuff grows in the middle of the street. Anyway, so I'm just anyway, it's getting late, so I just cut to it on those three. That's kind of where I am.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I agree. For some reason, we have this, desire to see the trellis be maintained here, and I think I like it aesthetically, that's just my opinion, but also I think the notion that trellis was the result of probably some careful thought and consideration leads me to believe that we should not simply abandon it for no apparent reason. So I agree with Mr. Swan and all of the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler.
Yeah, I have to agree with my colleagues. I remember when this came before the board, there was quite a bit of discussion of removing the door and replacing it with a trellis to keep it having that Greek revival feel on that side of the building. So I do have trepidation just tossing it out. Mind you, you could put it up and still put trees in front of it and you wouldn't see it from the road. So I think I'd have trouble agreeing with the trellis portion of the three requests. The other two I'm fine with. But I too agree with Mr. Swan. I think the trellis was an important replacement of a door that was there for, many years, many decades.
Ms. Scott. Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
think it's just a difficult position to put the board in to change something that was, there's a lot of compromise that goes into the initial decisions. And you don't know why somebody voted yes, and to come back and change it. I think it's a very high bar, maybe, the tree, it can't be planted, so people think it's, people can make a decision that it isn't necessary, but from all the comments I've heard, the board spent a lot of time thinking about the trellis, so I wouldn't support changing the plan.
All right, Mr. Malone.
Yeah, I'm really great.
Okay, Ms. Peck.
Yeah, agreed
All right.
strongly.
All right, I feel that, and as we went around, I imagine, does anyone disagree with the conclusion that this is in fact a minor modification, that we can address it in this manner? Does anyone feel contrary to that, which would escalate into a major modification requiring a butter notice and the applicants having to take a step back and come back before us? So that's sort of the threshold inquiry. Is it fair to say we all agree this is minor? Minor. Okay, no one disagrees. Okay, great. So that's part one. Part two is I too agree that the spirit of the original approval, which had the benefit of a sort of a collaborative effort, including abutters and other stakeholders, as well as of course yourselves. It was a thoughtful process that resulted in this. So I think you've heard the sentiment of the board. It seems resounding that there's an affinity felt with respect to that architectural element, at least that one of the three things. So I tend to agree as well. But I support the other two. Of the three, it's just that trellis creates an architectural reference to its architectural period that was important to us at the time, I think. Certainly was me, but any other thoughts before we proceed?
May I just ask?
And yeah, I was gonna ask you, Mr. Dodd.
Yeah,
if either
you just mentioned on the butters, situation on that?
Not really a butters, but it had full notice. It was when it came before us, it was an application that came before us with the benefit of full legal notice. And if I'm not mistaken, we, it had it was a full hearing, so it had that benefit. It's now back before us with a small request for a change, which is what we call under the zoning, it's a minor modification. So you have the benefit of being here without having to renotice.
No, I understand that, but you, in terms of, I thought you were alluding to way back when there was a butter situation that was calling into question that.
No, I just meant that
Oh, okay, got
it
it.
was a conversation that was inclusive and collaborative, beyond those that are merely in this room right now. And so when we are faced with a minor modification request, it's not lost on us often that we're being asked to sort of short circuit that full throw process from prior, the prior version of that application in favor of something that's just very narrowly tailored to this one issue without the benefit of new notice and that whole, public comment component. And so when we're asked to do that, we do it with a sharp eye toward, all right, this first has to be determined to be not significant enough to warrant that. And it seems like the board resoundingly feels that this is in fact minor. So we don't want you to leave without, without the benefit of us voting on this so that you can leave with a result. Versus having you have to republish and come back before us and it's a full hearing. So we want to do that. All right, well, I don't have anything further to add. And is there anything further that any member wishes to add before we endeavor to vote on the request? And do you folks wish to say anything further or add anything?
My final comment, I guess, is if we were to go way back into the archives of the other hearings, there was a comment made by one of the members as it relates to the door that was being removed was a fire hazard. And so when
If it was a fake
in other words,
door.
because of the construction of the house, it would have been a fake door, and therefore the fake door would have been a fire hazard. So it was,
Right.
the
Mhm.
opinion of the group that yes, you should get rid of that door.
Right.
So
I recall that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because a door that isn't a real door, invites access and egress in an emergency.
Correct.
Someone could waste critical time trying to get out of a door that will never open.
Or into a door,
Right.
like the fire department.
So it's not surprising to say, it seems like almost like an emergency responder trap, of sorts. So I recall that
Mhm.
vaguely, but I certainly, I don't recall, but I understand the context of that. And I don't disagree with the rationale. But I think the board, when this was back before us, what I recall was that in lieu of that balance, harkening back to a period when the interior architecture allowed for an operative
It
door.
was also a two-family house.
Right.
Now it's a one-family.
True.
So
I don't
I'm just-
disagree with you.
Right, but it's important to understand what you all are holding on to, which is this side door that you seem to be very attached to. It didn't work in the plan because it's now a one-family home.
Mhm.
It was historic, asked us to put a fake door, which we just had the conversation that it didn't make sense for various
Right.
reasons. So we thought, in the plan, you don't see any foliage, you don't see trees, you don't see any shrubbery. So it looked so vacant. So we thought, let's put something architectural, an ornament, a trellis to fill that void. Then during construction, we see that it's a problem to put plantings there. So you said, well, maybe we don't need plantings, just put a trellis, just keep it without plantings, which is not really an ideal trellis use. So that's all. It's more than just, we got rid of the door.
No, I appreciate that. And I certainly, I empathize and I respect that. If my colleagues will indulge me an extra moment, I know it's late. What about, if I might pose this, what about potted mandevilla of sorts or other kinds of ivy?
I would love
So-
that. It's beautiful,
so-
but because we have an 18-inch, about an 18-inch concrete perimeter, goes around the perimeter of the foundation.
Right.
And then the plantings begin about 18-inch,
here's 18 inches. It's hard to kind of get something meandering up the trellis. I think that
We're
would be
wandering
so
outside of
pretty.
our purview anyway, but I
So we just
posed the
was-
question because this is,
understood.
you know, this is how I'm thinking.
I'm just trying to explain to you that we didn't just randomly do this. We were advised by our landscapers, it would be difficult to grow something onto the trellis, and we just thought it would look really strange, to have just a trellis stuck up there. It's kind of like a wooden shutter, you just plop it up there. So that's our I just want you to fully understand where we're coming from. We don't mean to disrespect, lost the, we got rid of the door.
I appreciate that. Okay, anything else? Anyone have any thoughts with respect to that? If not, do we have a, and thank you for that extra moment. I appreciate that personally. Truly. Any, if there are no additional comments, do we have a motion?
Is it three separate things?
Yeah, it's gonna have to say board.
So I'll make a motion with respect to removing the special condition installing street tree that we move to consider to request minor to not do that. I don't know if I said that really wrong. I don't think the crack at this.
Yeah, I have it written in front of me, so.
Yeah,
I can do that.
Yeah.
They're all the same, all three of them the same.
Motion to consider the request for the street tree minor and approve the request for the minor modification to special permit for nonconformities 2020-71 and special permit 2020-70 for 21-23 Wall.
Seconded, well said. That's one.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded, calling the roll, and this is a roll call for everyone. We'll start, Mr. Swanton,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Ms. Peckman.
Yeah.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That is seven in the affirmative. The ayes have it, motion carries. Do we have a motion on the second?
Yeah, this is on the sidewalk. So we have that special word language from Andy.
Yep.
So, okay, so we'll make the motion to consider the request that the existing, to remove the condition that the existing sidewalk be replaced. That be considered minor, and to approve the request for minor modification to special permit for nonconformities 2020-71 and special permit 2020-70 for 21-23 Walnut Street.
So we have to add,
And we have to add the other thing. You have.
It's behind you.
The applicant shall be responsible for compliance with the applicable provisions of sections 2B. .46A, comma, Roman 10-H. .6. Q. And Roman 10-H 7B10 of the NZO with respect to the sidewalk transition at the northwest corner of the property's frontage on Walnut Street. As such, and in order to eliminate a tripping hazard, the applicant shall obtain written approval from the Newburyport Department of Public Services with respect to the installation of a suitable transition, materials, and or slope to be determined between the existing sidewalk along the frontage of the property and the adjacent segment of the quote unquote sidewalk along the frontage of abutting property at 25 Walnut Street.
Very good.
All right.
Motion's made and seconded by Mr. Swanton, calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
yes,
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Ms. Peckman.
Yeah.
And Rob Champetti, yes, that's 70 affirmative. The ayes have it, motion carries with that additional provision. Thank you. Steve, for putting that on the record. All right, do we have a motion on the third and final request?
All right, with respect to foregoing attaching a trellis on the side of the house. A motion to consider the request minor and approve the request for minor modification to the special permit for nonconformities 2020-71 and special permit 2020-70 for 21-23 Walnut Street.
I'll second that.
Very good. Motion is made by Mr. Malone. Thank you, Mr. Shannon, for the second, calling the roll on the motion, Mr. Swanton.
So this is to consider it mine, so I guess I vote no. If I want them to have a trellis, do I vote no? I'm sorry, so it's correct.
Yeah, say no.
Just say no.
You say it's minor and then you say not to approve.
Not, yeah, it's not minor, no.
Well, it's deemed minor, but no on the
It's a minor modification.
Yeah. Okay, just want to be clear, so we're all
We can
voting
consider.
on that, determining it's a minor modification as well, so they don't have to come back before us, in no formal way. So as long as that's embedded in the motion, I believe it is.
Yes.
And for Gretchen, who's not here, but listening to us and as the unenviable task of writing down all this that we're saying, so she'll get that right in the minutes. You voted no, correct? Yes to minor modification, no to the subject matter of the
I
third.
want them to have, to keep the trellis in Redland.
Okay, all right, Mr. Bennett.
I vote yes, that is a request for minor modification. I vote no with respect to the request.
Can
I vote like we did.
Okay, Mr. Chen.
I vote yes, that it is a minor modification, but I vote no, the trellis can be removed.
Okay, and Ms. Scott,
I vote yes as to minor modification and no to removal of the trellis.
Mr. Dewan, thank you.
Yes, to minor modification, no to removal of the trellis.
And Ms. Keckman.
Yes, to minor modification and no to.
Although I'm gonna be in the minority here, I vote yes to the minor modification, but I'm gonna vote yes to the request. I've changed my mind. Although it's no of the consequences here, but I've changed my mind. That said, okay, the ayes have it. The motion carries and 2 of the 3 are approved and folks, good luck to you and thank you for your patience and thank you for your time. Thank you. Good evening. Have a good evening. Okay, moving now to the approval of the minutes of 9/27. Do we have any changes to the minutes, any modifications to minutes, or with a motion to approve them?
They were exhausting.
Yes. Motion to approve. All right, seconded. All right, motion to approve the minutes as written, made and seconded. All those in favor, this is just a voice vote. All those in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Any no votes, abstentions? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you again, Gretchen.
You're welcome.
I didn't know that you can talk back to us. That's great.
You should hear what I say when you can't hear.
You're like, I'm gonna show my, you're like Charlie, right? Hello.
Oh, yeah.
We're the ZBA angels and hello angels, you know. Thanks very much for all that you're doing, seriously. Okay, request for the reconsideration of section 5.5, the rules and regs with respect to 2 Neptune Street. So we have the energy, it's 10:10. I'll open it up to whoever wants to lead off, if anyone, on whether the board undertakes a request for reconsideration. Under the rules, for those, and you may all well know, only someone voting in the majority has the standing to make a motion for reconsideration, which essentially reverts back to the board de novo. And unfortunately, most of us are lawyers here, and those that aren't, unfortunately, probably know de novo means we have to do it all over again. And so that's how the process works. And so that is the standing requirement. And with that, who wants to lead off? Jump in.
Should anyone that was not at the meeting?
You won't have the standing to make a motion, but you're certainly
Have an opinion on the request.
Absolutely, yeah.
just to open it up, I don't have a problem with the reconsideration on its face. But I wasn't at the meeting and I don't know how strongly the board was in one direction or the other.
It's 3-2.
Yeah, the vote was 3-2, 3-2, no,
Against.
yeah, 3-2 against.
It was 3-2.
That was 3-2.
So it didn't,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the super
so-
majority
Didn't
didn't count. Yeah.
Right, so that means that it is a member who voted in the majority. Which was a favorable but not sufficient majority, it was a simple majority, but not a super majority.
And then.
I think you were the two.
May I make a comment?
Yeah, and there's no particular order. so-
According to the fourth edition of the notes on Robert's rules, the purpose of reconsidering vote is to, quote, permit correction of hasty, ill-advised or erroneous action,
Mhm.
or to take into account added information or a changed situation that developed since the taking of the vote. Therefore, I see no problem with the reconsideration.
In fairness, and I know that, and I respect that you quoted that, because that's great, because not many people who would among us actually read that stuff, but a change of mind is, a change of mind is included in change of circumstance. And so that very malleable human factor is also not excluded from the purpose of reconsideration. It's simply a reflection and change of sentiment, change of heart, for.
Oh, I was thinking that the change of sentiment had to be grounded in new facts or the realization that one had not considered all the information.
Yeah, it is that, but it is also a change in one's sense of whether they properly applied the standard of review at the time, and whether they erred in their.
I see.
So that is, it's inclusive of, hey, you know what? It was late, I was tired, I moved quickly, or, hey, I just didn't really think of everything. Keep in mind that this is an imperfect process. We're asked to give judicial like review on the spot, like with little notice, right? And we're faced with the battle of the legal memoranda, if you can imagine such a thing, right? And so a well-researched, well-written, presumably well-thought-out document that articulates the legal criteria, arguments for or against, are presented to us in writing and orally argued on the spot. And, we're not required to be, thank God, like members of the legal profession, but even those among us who are hard pressed, and any rational person, hard pressed to really be able to give full review to stuff like that, which is thrown at us, in a sequence of others waiting to be heard. So I think it's, I've been on this board long enough where I've only seen it happen once, maybe twice. I've seen it come back for reasons like that. In fact, I was part of that. It was what's behind some little hamburger shop right next to Port Tavern. What's that?
Oh,
Like Prince Place. Do you remember when Chris Moran had done the project on Prince Place? There was that penthouse. Do you remember that? It's right next to the library across from Prince Place. That was the one I remember I was part of. That the only one we came back before us for reconsideration, and what was a no became a yes. And it was because a few members just felt like, I just didn't really give this enough thought at the time. And they just applied the same facts and the same criteria, but came to a different result, which was interesting. But that doesn't mean that's what we have to do.
The other thing that I took into account was the note from the applicant. So I remember she'd come before us before with several continuances. She made the argument that if she realized we were going to a vote, she would lose. She may have withdrawn, which she did before.
That's, and she was pro se, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, someone marshaled over the gravity of the cliff without realizing technically that there's a procedural exit, that they just have to speak up quickly. That's really sort of holding someone adversely accountable for the fact that they're not an attorney, that they're not versed in this, this process. And I think that in balance and fairness, it wouldn't be irrational for us to say, well, all right, had they known, would they have tapped the brakes and said, wait a minute, I want to take a sharper pencil to this. We would often, if not almost always, give that individual the opportunity to step back and refine it and try to come back better.
Right, to your point, if Attorney Mead was here and saw this thing going off the cliff, she would have hit the brake. The chair, I would, withdraw or continue.
I will own that too, because in the absence of someone in that position, I try to keep an eye out for that and give someone, a quick pause and say, listen, this is what's about to happen.
Yeah, usually you forewarn them.
I usually do that, and I don't know, I feel an ownership here because I missed that
Yeah,
somehow.
that didn't happen, and I would follow the point, that resonates with me, that because it seems to be our operating procedure.
For sure.
And I understand. Yeah, I understand this, I don't want her to be, vote shouting here, right? I mean, she can count the numbers as well as but there is some that resonates a bit with me, that typically we give the option, well, it's gonna be if we wanna go back and sharpen your pencil, et cetera, but, I don't know.
I think in this matter, the applicant had a lot of experience in front of this board, and I think she knew what, I can't say I think she knew what the procedure was. She should have known what the procedure was, and that when we were finished with our deliberation, it would go to a vote. And the other thing that resonates strongly with me is that, unlike most of our applicants, since we have shifted back to in-person or hybrid meetings, she's on the phone, she never knows. I don't think we've had.
She might not. She
I
might
think
not realize
that's
the voting
good
members
as
were.
well. Interested.
Yeah.
So you're feeling, Steve, that that because there was that sort of sensory deprivation of being in the room and reading the board members physically, that maybe she was a half a step behind what was happening and didn't respond quickly and that.
No, I'm going in the opposite
Oh,
direction of that.
She should have been here.
It was incumbent upon the applicant to,
Yeah,
to be here.
go ahead.
I will also say that the plan that the board was presented with was very, very similar to the plan that the board was poised to deny, a year and a half earlier. The upward extension dimensions were exactly the same, the formula was set up differently. So plans had been introduced and then on the verge of being denied, continued, but I think the board was looking at a plan that was really different from the very first one in May of 2021.
I will say, I think that she, has a good case for, going to court with abuse of discretion, because I know that she has to come because of the existing nonconformities to this board. But the reason that, that people voted no, because they didn't like the dormers, right? Which the city has made a decision as a public policy matter that if not for the existing nonconformity, those dormers would have been allowed on that building by right. So I think that is, if I were her, I might go to court, and she seems like the type to go to court. So that's just something to take into consideration as to, she's probably not gonna let it drop if, and I don't know how the court would rule on that. I just don't know the answer.
Yeah, on that point, I mean, in your sentence, you said if it wasn't for the fact they were like right on top of the street, but that was the whole discussion. That was.
And that's part of our charge under the
I understand.
92 location.
And it's actually not such a thing as a conforming dormer in terms of this board. It means that it's exempt from the historical commission review to these dimensional requirements, but it's still an upward extension. And so that was the ground for my objection, was that that much new massing.
But on the historical building.
Oh, I don't care if it's historical. I don't want that much massing and that much height on that close to the street.
If I could make one other comment, we were talking earlier about did this applicant know of, what the process is, and actually went back and printed out each of the times we were on this topic, and 5 times last year, we got to a point of denial and they continued.
What's application?
On this, two Neptune. Yeah. In May, the next month in June. Next month, you know, they took a month off because we didn't have enough of a quorum. But,
It
you
wasn't
know,
quorum, but.
so my point is,
Not to be heard.
yeah, it was 4, but my point is. It's not like somebody who's not familiar with the process. This is somebody who kept presenting, in my opinion, slight revisions of the same thing. And kept pulling it back. Until.
Unrepresented, those pro se, she just getting that applicant just unrepresented by.
Always, she was always by her side.
No,
The first
the
time she was represented.
Right, actually, the first 2 times, the next 3 last year, she was not. And so it's,
They're not unfamiliar with the mechanics.
I think after you do it 5 times, yeah.
I think
Make
you
a
did a
solid-
very good job representing.
I think she did a very good job representing it. I just have massive issues that goes in screen.
Okay, so listen, this is, I got, you know, with respect to your time in the hour, but also the importance of addressing this, I get, you know, I appreciate everybody who's coming from on this. I think that discussing it all together and out loud, on site, on spot is important for us to sort of revive our memory, but also, you know, give focused, you know, give focused thought to this request so that we'll be very deliberative in whatever we decide. This is, you know, our docket's full and getting no less full, so, you know, it isn't without impact upon the administration of this work that, you know, someone is being, will be given an opportunity to come back, so we weigh that in the balance, and the balance of that equity with somebody having gotten it there. Yeah, that's always important, in my opinion, hyper important. You know, the administration of our work and how the public perceives its balance and fairness and empathy is always important. But balance, fairness, and empathy, like all else in the world, you know, have a limit because we live in a world of limits, right? You know, we have to at some point say when. So if that is now, this is the application, when we say when, then we should take the vote and we should see where we fall. But it sounds like what I'm hearing that everyone seems to feel as though this wasn't sort of the inexperienced applicant that was just caught in the switches and, you know, things were moving faster than they were keeping pace with, but rather, it was given its full and fair review and the decision just didn't go the applicant's way. And that by itself isn't a reason to request a reconsideration.
Right.
You know, because it didn't go your way is not by itself evidence that it was not balanced and fair and thoughtful. It's just evidence that the decision-making parties did not see it the way, which is spirit of this process. So do we, is there anything you guys want to add before we just take a vote and, or are we ready to take a vote on this on whether to move forward with reconsideration or whether to not? And since it's a reconsideration, unless someone makes and it's a request, so I will invite a motion for reconsideration, and then we'll vote on that. And a no vote is evidence that you do not favor reconsideration. And if the majority votes no, then the matter is not reconsidered and we don't take it back. And then we go into the next piece, which is a review of the draft decision. Right? Caitlin, is that right? If we do decide to be affirmative, that we're going to entertain a request for reconsideration, then we don't take on number 3B. Because there's no decision to review yet. And we have to
That's the point. Who has the authority to move? Reconsider?
anyone, so anyone who voted in the majority at the application.
Stand majority.
I thought it was the prevailing side.
Prevailing.
I'm sorry, the prevailing, yes,
Prevailing.
I apologize. Usually,
Right.
yeah.
They're synonymous.
Yeah. Well, not always.
This is the minority, the prevailing side.
It's not, this is, if ever there was a bar review question.
Right.
And if no motion,
Or a Robert's Rules of Order question.
you know, no motion is made, then that.
Well, no, a motion will be made but not successful. So the motion should still be made, you know, and made in the affirmative and seconded, and then a vote's taken and a no vote is.
But the 2 no votes, again, is you need a super majority to 2 no votes to beat the
2 no votes to beat the draft, yeah, you don't need a superintendent, sorry, I didn't think I got to. Right, or the weeds.
It's the same as if you were
agree?
reviewing the application.
Why would that be?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I was gonna have-
Why wouldn't there be parity in supermajority? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. Why don't we err on the side of caution and let's just hold ourselves accountable to that higher standard, and then this way, if we're wrong.
Well, I think there is a threshold question. If neither Trish or Ken seek to make this motion, I think that's
It's
the
the
end
end
of
of
it.
it, right? Yeah,
That's the end of it.
that's what I was getting at.
I don't think the motion, I don't think,
Sure.
neither Ken or
That's
Tricia
what I understand.
are obligated to move or
And if there's 7 people vote, we need 5 yeses,
I'm just, the
No, only
only
the people that voted can vote.
only those original 5,
I think that's what Andy's email said.
yeah.
only the original 5, okay.
And the only reason I'm kind of
Gotcha.
helping us with, it's not really part of Robert's rules, but it renders an affirmative recordable event versus the minutes reflecting silence, is not as discernible. So I'm almost manufacturing a recordable event, which does no harm, I think, but it's not required. It's just that the minutes can say that a motion was made and it was seconded and it failed. That's a, more palpable in the record than, we waited for a little while, not sure how long, we didn't hear anything, then we were gone. I don't know, I mean, that's the dilemma. If you have a preference, we can do that, but let's just move forward on. I will do this, I'll ask for a
Point of order. I asked this question to Andy today. I think these guys are looking at us. They're looking-
That would be another consideration.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Guys, let's do this. Let's advance this. I will, as chair, I will put it on the floor. And if a motion is volleyed, then I'll ask for a second. And if a motion is not volleyed,
It does.
it dies. It's just, I was, like I said, I was only trying to manufacture something that was discernible and say, it didn't happen. But, all right, do we have a motion by one of the members of the ZBA that voted with the prevailing side? Is that correct?
Yeah,
I think it's on the application.
so no votes.
Do they make, is there a motion to reconsider by one of the 2 members who voted with the prevailing decision of the original vote? That is Ms. Pecknick and who's the other, Mr. Swanton. I'll just say this can be recorded. Mr. Swanton, do you have a motion?
No.
Ms. Pecknick, do you have a motion?
No.
Okay, hearing no motion from all of the members that have standing to make a motion. We, as the chair, I can conclude that we are, that the board is not going to undertake the request for reconsideration. That request respectfully pass. So with that, we will move on to the review of the draft decision that is before us based on the vote we did take. And we have any.
Can we go off record just a minute?
Sure.
Excuse me, just so you know, we are live and there's an audience.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep-
Go off the record then.
No, we don't.
Not off record. Would it be appropriate to have a definitive vote based upon a motion to deny the request for consideration from either?
I think the minutes would just reflect that the motion made.
I agree. We've already, Greg, my original sentiment was to do something that was discernible, even if it was over captured. But I think that Gretchen's right. I mean, it's now in the record. No motion was made. There's something that Gretchen can record. And I just want to be absolutely fair. We all want to be fair to not just this applicant, but any applicant and the public, that when this sort of thing happens, that there's a process, we endeavor to take our best effort toward giving it its review.
Can I make one other, I'm
Yeah.
reading Andy's comments say that any one of the 5 that voted that night can make the motion. According to Robert's rules.
That's what it's, it's what it is, that's what
Well, that's significant,
Right.
no.
I agree with, I disagree.
It says any one of the 5 can make the motion, any one of the 5 can second it. Just,
Okay, let's do this, just so that we can be inclusive. I don't agree with that, but let's, if there is, is there anyone, is there anyone who wishes to make a motion, to reconsider?
Before we do that, we might want to be clear and crisp on who can make this motion.
Well, we're gonna be inclusive, so.
Okay. Well, I will move for a motion for reconsideration.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bennett to grant reconsideration. We have a second. Motion's been made by Mr. Bennett. If we follow that paradigm, we'll require a second to actually stage a vote. In the absence of that, the motion fails by lack of second. Expires. Any seconds? Respect me? If you want to just say yes or no, just so that,
No.
just so, because.
No.
Mr. Lyle, no. Ms. Scout?
I think it's just the 5 that voted.
Mr. Chairman,
I was not one of the 5.
Mr. Bennett is but the moving party, so that just leaves Mr. Swanton.
No.
And myself, no.
Yes, fails under both.
Yeah, so we've got.
Both attempts.
For the record and posterity and all those listening, with due respect, apologies for what may appear to be a little bit unwieldy, but it is our best effort to try to be as credible as possible and as inclusive as possible under the circumstances. That was why we've done it twice, both ways. All right, anything further on the draft decision? We don't need to, we need to undertake that.
I sent it out if there's edits,
We can send it back.
let me
Yeah,
know.
can we're not gonna do that live, now. We'll do that via email, just let the planning office know and let Caitlin know if there's any changes. I know on other updates, and so with that, we've concluded business this evening. Thank you, guys, and we have a motion to adjourn. Second. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed, no votes, abstention, the ayes have it, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned, and anyone still. Thank you.